Did you know that Rick Sanchez's original backstory was completely different from what we see in the show today? The early drafts had Rick as a scientist who accidentally killed his family in an experiment gone wrong, which is why he was so distant from everyone else and drank so much. In the actual show, we learn Rick is distant because he abandoned his family to fight in a war against the Galactic Federation and founded the resistance known as the Citadel. This long and complex history is just one of the hundreds of fascinating facts we'll be covering throughout these next 2.5 hours as you drift off to sleep with the multiverse's favorite grandfather-grandson duo. One of the most peculiar characters in Rick and Morty isn't even a main character, but rather someone who seemingly appeared out of nowhere and immediately felt like he'd always been there. Mr. Poopybutthole made his debut in the Season 2 episode Total Recall, an episode where alien parasites invade the Smith household by implanting false memories of themselves as longtime friends and family members. What makes Mr. Poopybutthole so interesting is that, unlike the other new characters introduced in this episode, he wasn't actually a parasite at all. He was real. When we first meet him, Mr. Poopybutthole is presented as a longtime family friend who has apparently shared countless adventures with the Smiths. He's right there in the opening scene, watching TV with the family as if he's always been a part of their lives. His thin, yellow, pill-shaped body with a top hat makes him visually distinct from almost every other character in the show's universe. This immediate visual differentiation is our first clue that there's something fundamentally different about him compared to the rest of the Rick and Morty universe. The episode revolves around the family trying to determine who among them is real and who is a memory parasite. Rick discovers that these parasites can only create positive memories, so the test becomes simple. If you have a negative memory of someone, they must be real. This leads to a darkly humorous sequence where family members recall terrible experiences with each other to confirm their authenticity. Yet somehow, despite supposedly being a longtime family friend, nobody seems to have any negative memories of Mr. Poopybutthole. This creates the perfect setup for one of the show's most shocking moments. Beth, convinced that Mr. Poopybutthole must be a parasite due to the absence of negative memories, shoots him in the chest. But instead of transforming into an alien like the parasites do when killed, he bleeds actual blood and is rushed to the hospital. This moment of violence confirms what should have been impossible according to the episode's established rules. Mr. Poopybutthole is completely real, despite having no history on the show prior to this episode. The yellow color scheme of Mr. Poopybutthole is particularly noteworthy in a show where most alien species have their own distinct color patterns. Yellow often symbolizes awareness, enlightenment, and perception in various cultural contexts, which aligns perfectly with what we later learn about Mr. Poopybuthole's abilities. His vibrant yellow appearance makes him stand out not just to viewers but within the universe itself, suggesting he exists somewhat apart from the normal rules of the Rick and Morty multiverse. What truly sets Mr. Poopybutthole apart from almost every other character in the series is his unique ability to break the fourth wall. While Rick occasionally makes meta-references that suggest he's aware he's in a TV show, Mr. Poopybutthole takes this awareness to another level. At the end of Season 2, as he's recovering from being shot by Beth, he addresses the audience directly, speculating about what might happen in Season 3, and even accurately predicting how long fans would have to wait for new episodes. This pattern continues throughout the series, with Mr. Poopybutthole appearing at the conclusion of seasons to speak directly to viewers about the future of the show. What's particularly strange is that his predictions about premiere dates and production timelines are consistently accurate, suggesting he somehow has knowledge of the real world outside the show's fictional universe. Unlike Rick's occasional fourth wall breaks, which are played for laughs, Mr. Poopybuthole's direct addresses feel more significant and mysterious, as if he's serving as a bridge between the fictional world and our reality. His knowledge extends beyond just production schedules. Mr. Poopybutthole often seems to have an awareness of future events within the show's timeline that he shouldn't logically possess. He appears to understand the narrative structure of Rick and Morty as a television series rather than experiencing it as lived reality like the other characters. This omniscient perspective raises profound questions about the nature of his existence. Is he somehow aware that he's in a TV show in ways that even Rick isn't? Does he exist partially outside the boundaries of the fictional universe? This awareness has led to numerous fan theories about Mr. Poopybuthole's true nature and origin. Some speculate he might be connected to the show's creators themselves, serving as their avatar within the fictional world. Others wonder if he exists outside the Central Finite Curve, the section of the multiverse where Rick is the smartest being alive, allowing him a perspective on events that even Rick cannot access. His apparent immunity to the memory parasites, despite having no established history, suggests he might operate according to different metaphysical rules than other characters. What's even more fascinating is that, according to interviews with the show's creators, Mr. Poopybutthole was originally meant to be killed off permanently in his debut episode. The character was initially conceived as part of the Total Recall joke, a character who appeared to be a parasite but was surprisingly real, only to be immediately removed from the story. However, the character resonated so strongly with both the creative team and fans that he was brought back, evolving from a one-off gag into one of the show's most enigmatic recurring characters. This behind-the-scenes change in plans for the character mirrors Mr. Poopybuthole's in-universe role as someone who seems to exist both within and outside the narrative. His evolution from throwaway character to meta-commentator parallels how he transcends the boundaries between the show's reality and our own. Each subsequent appearance has expanded his role and deepened the mystery surrounding him, transforming him from a simple joke into a character who might hold keys to understanding the show's larger cosmology. Despite appearing in multiple episodes across several seasons, we know remarkably little about Mr. Poopybuthole's life before his introduction. Where did he come from? What is his species? How did he become friends with the Smith family? The show has deliberately kept these questions unanswered, maintaining his enigmatic status. We've seen glimpses of his life after his introduction, his recovery from being shot, his marriage, the birth of his child, his career as a professor. But his origins remain shrouded in mystery. This deliberate withholding of information about his background stands in stark contrast to how the show handles other recurring characters, who typically receive extensive backstories and development. The absence of explanation itself becomes significant, suggesting that Mr. Poopybuthole's origins might be too complex or too revealing about the nature of the show's universe to be casually explained. The mystery surrounding Mr. Poopybutthole runs deeper than most fans realize. Behind his cartoonish name and simple design lies a character who might fundamentally challenge everything we understand about Rick and Morty's universe, especially when you consider the show's origins as a Back to the Future. Parody and what that means for characters who exist outside normal narrative constraints. What's particularly striking about Mr. Poopybutthole isn't just his sudden appearance in the Smith family's life, but the conspicuous absence of any canonical information about his origins. The show's writers have deliberately avoided explaining where he comes from, what his species is called, or whether there's a planet of poopy buttholes somewhere in the vast multiverse. This intentional information gap stands in sharp contrast to how the show handles other alien species, who typically receive at least some basic world building. This vacuum of backstory information has spawned multiple competing theories about his true nature. Some fans speculate he comes from a dimension populated entirely by his species, a poopy butthole dimension, similar to how we've seen dimensions specific to other character types. Others propose he might be completely unique in the multiverse, a singular entity that somehow exists across multiple realities simultaneously. The show's reluctance to confirm either theory only deepens the enigma surrounding him. We do get glimpses of his life beyond his interactions with the Smith family. In later seasons, we see him as a professor, suggesting a level of academic achievement and intellectual capacity that belies his simplistic appearance. While his cartoonish design and silly name might lead viewers to dismiss him as mere comic relief, his professional accomplishments hint at hidden depths. What kind of education system produced Professor Poopybutthole? What subjects does he teach? These questions remain tantalizing mysteries that the show dangles before us without resolution. His family life offers additional insights into his character. Post-credit scenes reveal his relationship with Mrs. Poopybutthole and their baby, showing a domestic life that progresses linearly between seasons, while most characters in the show remain relatively static. This consistent aging and life progression separates him from nearly every other character in the series. While the Smith family seems locked in a perpetual present, Mr. Poopybutthole's timeline moves forward in a way that mirrors our real-world progression between seasons, suggesting he experiences time differently than the show's main characters. Animation buffs might notice subtle differences in how scenes featuring Mr. Poopybutthole are rendered compared to other characters. These visual distinctions, while subtle, potentially signal that he exists on a different plane of reality than the Smith family. The animation shifts aren't obvious enough to break immersion, but they create a subconscious sense that something about him is fundamentally different. These animation choices may be deliberate clues rather than stylistic choices, quietly reinforcing his outsider status within the show's universe. One of the most compelling theories about Mr. Poopybutthole is that he might originate from outside the Central Finite Curve, the walled-off section of the multiverse containing only universes where Rick is the smartest being. If true, this would explain why he seems unaffected by many of the rules and limitations that govern other characters in the show. His immunity to certain physical and narrative constraints could stem from his existence outside the boundaries Rick established to maintain his supremacy across dimensions. His distinctive yellow coloration might be more than just a visual quirk. It could be the key that unlocks the truth about how he exists both within and beyond the show's reality. Yellow characters in animation often possess meta-awareness or reality-altering abilities. Think of characters like The Simpsons who can break the fourth wall or exist in a state of narrative flexibility. Mr. Poopybuthole's bright yellow appearance sets him apart visually from most other characters in the show, potentially hinting at his unique nature or origins. While the show doesn't explicitly state the meaning of his color, the use of color in animation often denotes importance or hints at a character's nature. This visual distinction sets him apart and invites speculation about his role in the series, making him stand out in a crowd of characters. His coloration could be a visual cue, suggesting that Mr. Poopybutthole is different from the other characters, possibly hinting at his true nature or origins. The deliberate choice to make him yellow might be the creator's way of subtly signaling to viewers that he operates under different rules than other characters. The show's creators have used Mr. Poopybutthole as a meta-commentator on the series, often coinciding with major shifts in the show's narrative direction or production changes. Originally intended as a one-off joke, he became a fan favorite, leading to his recurring role. This evolution of the character from a throwaway joke to a recurring meta-element highlights the show's ability to subvert expectations and create intrigue around seemingly minor characters. This recurring role allows the writers to comment on the show's narrative and production, making him a unique character within the Rick and Morty universe. To fully appreciate Mr. Poopybuthole's significance, we need to remember that Rick and Morty's origins are rooted in a Back to the Future parody. This connection suggests that Mr. Poopybutthole might be a meta-reference to characters who exist outside the main narrative in those types of stories, adding another layer of complexity to his character. This origin story provides a framework for understanding Mr. Poopybuthole's role in the series, potentially hinting at his connection to the show's creators or the Central Finite Curve. In Back to the Future and similar sci-fi narratives, there are often characters who seem to understand the mechanics of time travel and dimensional hopping better than the protagonists. Characters who exist to explain the rules or comment on the absurdity of the situation. Mr. Poopybutthole might serve a similar function in Rick and Morty, acting as a bridge between the show's internal reality and its status as a piece of meta-fiction. His ability to address the audience directly suggests he understands that he's part of a television show, a level of awareness that even Rick, for all his genius, doesn't consistently demonstrate. These metafictional elements become even more significant when we consider how Mr. Poopybuthole's appearances often coincide with season finales and premieres. Moments when the boundary between the show's world and our world is at its thinnest. His messages to viewers about upcoming seasons blend seamlessly with his character development within the show, creating a unique narrative position where he exists simultaneously as part of the story and as a commentator on that story. The careful balance of reverence and parody that defines Rick and Morty's relationship to science fiction tropes appears in concentrated form in Mr. Poopybuthole's character. He simultaneously embodies and subverts the mysterious alien archetype common in sci-fi, presenting as both ridiculous, with his name and appearance, and profound, with his meta-awareness and emotional depth. This duality makes him the perfect vessel for the show's broader themes about finding meaning in an absurd multiverse. What separates Mr. Poopybutthole's fourth wall breaks from simple meta-humor is their uncanny precision. While most TV characters who address the audience simply wink at viewers in a playful acknowledgement, Mr. Poopybutthole's direct communications serve a more profound purpose. His season finale addresses aren't just cute asides. They function as remarkably accurate forecasts of the show's production timeline. When he tells us the next season is a year and a half away, or longer, he's not making a guess. He's stating a fact that aligns perfectly with the actual release schedule. This pattern emerges too consistently to be coincidental, suggesting his awareness transcends normal character constraints. The strategic placement of these fourth wall breaks reveals another layer to his abilities. His appearances frequently coincide with major shifts in the show's narrative direction or actual production changes. This isn't random, it's calculated. When the show faces behind-the-scenes challenges or prepares to pivot its storytelling approach, Mr. Poopybutthole materializes as if summoned to ease the transition. His direct addresses in season finales and premieres, particularly his appearance in the Season 6 premiere, perfectly align with real-world production changes and the show's evolving direction. Comparing his meta-awareness to Rick's reveals a fascinating distinction. While Rick occasionally acknowledges the constructed nature of his reality with throwaway comments about ratings or episodes, his fourth wall breaks feel more like sarcastic jabs at storytelling conventions. Mr. Poopybutthole, however, demonstrates a deeper understanding of the show as an ongoing narrative with real-world constraints. Rick breaks the fourth wall as if it's another rule he can bend. Mr. Poopybutthole speaks through it, as if he naturally exists on both sides simultaneously. The specific language he uses when addressing the audience carries significant weight. His messages aren't vague. They contain precise timing predictions about season premieres that match actual production schedules with eerie accuracy. This suggests a consciousness that somehow spans both the fictional universe and our reality. While other characters remain trapped in their narrative, Mr. Poopybutthole seems aware of the larger framework containing it, including production delays, season lengths, and even audience reactions. This unusual awareness has led to a compelling theory. Mr. Poopybutthole might function as the writer's avatar within the show itself. His direct communications could represent a channel between creators and audience that preserves the show's internal logic while acknowledging external realities. This would explain why his messages often come at critical junctures when the writers need to communicate directly with fans about the show's future. He serves as a buffer between the show's internal reality and the audience's external reality, particularly during turbulent production periods. The physical transformations Mr. Poopybutthole undergoes between seasons take on additional meaning when viewed through this lens. His recovery from Beth's gunshot wound, his marriage, and his career progression as a professor might symbolically represent the production challenges and evolutions the actual show experiences. His physical therapy after being shot could mirror the show working through early production struggles, while his family expansion could represent the growing production team and expanding narrative scope. What makes this even more intriguing is how his appearances correlate with significant shifts in the show's direction. Major announcements about the series, changes in writing staff, or new season approaches are often preceded or followed by Mr. Poopybuthole's appearances. This pattern suggests he functions as a narrative device preparing viewers for transitions, almost like a cosmic TV guide existing partially within and partially outside the show's universe. These observations raise a fascinating scientific possibility. Could his consciousness actually exist across multiple dimensions simultaneously? In the context of Rick and Morty's established multiverse, this isn't as far-fetched as it might initially seem. The show presents dimensional awareness as a genuine concept, with Rick constantly navigating between realities. Mr. Poopybutthole might represent an even more advanced version of this awareness, one that permits perception not just of parallel dimensions but of the meta-dimensional relationship between fiction and reality. The scientific basis for this type of awareness finds surprising support in actual theoretical physics. Modern interpretations of quantum mechanics, particularly the many worlds interpretation, propose that all possible outcomes of quantum measurements occur in separate worlds or universes. While Rick can travel between parallel universes within the show's fiction, Mr. Poopybutthole appears capable of perceiving the boundary between fiction and non-fiction, a type of dimensional awareness that transcends even Rick's capabilities. This connects to real scientific discussions about dimensional perception. Theoretical physicists have proposed models where higher dimensional beings would perceive lower dimensions in ways incomprehensible to those constrained within them. Much like how three-dimensional beings can see all parts of a two-dimensional plane simultaneously. Applied to narrative, this suggests that fourth-wall awareness could represent a character perceiving the higher dimension of authorship and audience that contains their fictional universe. Animation techniques further emphasize Mr. Poopybutthole's special status. The subtle differences in his animation, smoother movements, and distinctive design elements might be deliberate visual cues suggesting his existence on a different plane of reality. These visual anomalies set him apart from other characters and hint at his true origin beyond the show's conventional boundaries. During periods of significant production challenges, Mr. Poopybuthole's meta-commentary has proven especially valuable as a communication tool. Season transitions marked by extended delays or creative restructuring are often the moments when his character shines brightest, addressing audience concerns directly while maintaining the show's narrative integrity. This was particularly evident during the transition to Season 7, when recasting the main characters created significant behind-the-scenes drama that needed addressing without disrupting the show's internal logic. His ability to predict future seasons with such accuracy suggests a consciousness that somehow perceives time differently than other characters, perhaps experiencing it non-linearly or from multiple vantage points simultaneously. This adds another dimension to his character beyond simple comedy, positioning him as a narrative anchor point with a unique relationship to the show's temporal structure. What elevates Mr. Poopybutthole beyond a mere novelty is how his abilities contribute to the show's broader themes. Rick and Morty consistently explores the relationship between free will and determinism, the nature of reality versus perception, and the search for meaning in an absurd multiverse. Mr. Poopybuthole's dimensional awareness embodies these philosophical questions in concentrated form. A character who understands the constructed nature of his reality, yet still finds meaning within it. For all his dimensional awareness, there's a glaring absence in Rick and Morty's extensive multiverse exploration. We've never seen where Mr. Poopybutthole actually comes from. The Citadel houses countless Ricks and Mortys from across the multiverse, even featuring Rick variants made of corn, shrimp, and literally everything else imaginable. Yet somehow, across all these reality-hopping adventures, we've never encountered a dimension populated by Poopybuttholes. This conspicuous absence isn't just a minor oversight, it might be one of the show's most carefully protected mysteries. The concept of character-specific dimensions is well established within the Rick and Morty universe. The Citadel of Ricks serves as the most prominent example, an entire dimension populated exclusively by different versions of Rick and Morty, each with their own unique experiences and personalities. We've seen dimensions where everyone is a chair, where pizzas order humans for delivery, and where smartphones evolved into the dominant species. The show constantly reinforces that if something exists, there's probably an entire dimension built around it. So why have we never visited a dimension where yellow, top-hat-wearing Poopybuttholes are the dominant species? This absence becomes even more striking when we consider how extensively Rick has traveled throughout the multiverse. While the exact number of dimensions Rick C-137 has visited isn't explicitly stated in the show's canon, we know he's explored enough worlds to have developed a standardized cataloging system, complete with designated dimension markers like C-137. His portal gun technology allows near-infinite access to alternate realities, yet the Poopybutthole homeworld remains conspicuously absent from his travel log. One compelling theory is that Mr. Poopybuthole's dimension might exist beyond the Central Finite Curve, that carefully cordoned-off section of the multiverse where Rick is always the smartest being. As explained in the Season 5 finale, Rick's deliberately separated the multiverses where they dominate from the rest of infinite reality. This massive cosmic manipulation would explain why Rick hasn't visited the Poopybutthole dimension, It might simply exist outside his accessible range, beyond the boundaries he himself helped establish. If Mr. Poopybutthole's home reality does exist beyond the Central Finite Curve, it would remain unexplored, shielded from Rick's influence and the show's typical interdimensional adventures. This positioning would make perfect sense given what we know about Mr. Poopybutthole's unique abilities. A being from outside the curve wouldn't be constrained by Rick's dominance hierarchy and might possess awareness beyond what Rick himself can perceive. Exactly the kind of fourth wall-breaking powers that Mr. Poopybutthole demonstrates. The possibility of an inaccessible Poopybutthole dimension also raises fascinating questions about cosmic protection in the show's universe. What if there's something about Mr. Poopybutthole's home reality that makes it deliberately hidden or protected? Perhaps his species possesses abilities that even Rick considers dangerous or unpredictable. Rick has shown remarkable caution around Mr. Poopybutthole, despite his seemingly harmless appearance, never attempting to study him, clone him, or even question his origins. This uncharacteristic restraint from someone who regularly dissects aliens suggests Rick might know more about Mr. Poopybuthole's nature than he's willing to admit. Another possibility is that dimensions outside the Central Finite Curve operate under fundamentally different rules. The show's exploration of the multiverse structure suggests that dimensions beyond the curve could be subject to different physical laws and realities. Perhaps in Mr. Poopybuthole's home dimension, the very concepts of space, time, and existence function differently, allowing its inhabitants to perceive the constructed nature of reality in ways Rick can't fully comprehend. This would explain why Mr. Poopybutthole seems to exist partially within the show's reality and partially outside it. His dimensional origins might grant him a unique perspective on the nature of existence itself. When we analyze other yellow characters in the show, a pattern begins to emerge. Yellow often signals characters with unusual relationships to reality. The alien parasites that invaded the Smith household in Total Recall had distinctive yellow elements to their designs. Judge Morty, who later becomes President Morty, often called Evil Morty by fans, used a yellow portal to escape the Central Finite Curve. These connections suggest yellow might serve as a visual signifier for beings that can manipulate or transcend conventional reality barriers. Exactly what Mr. Poopybutthole does with his fourth wall awareness. The theory that Mr. Poopybuthole's dimension might be deliberately shielded from Rick's access gains further credibility when we consider the larger cosmic conflicts in the series. If his species possesses natural immunity to mind manipulation, as evidenced by his survival during the parasite invasion, they would pose a significant threat to any beings relying on deception or mind control. In a multiverse where cosmic entities regularly battle for dominance, a species immune to mental manipulation would be extremely valuable, and potentially worth protecting from figures like Rick, who might exploit such abilities. The animation shifts that occur whenever Mr. Poopybutthole appears on screen provide another subtle clue. There's an almost imperceptible change in the visual language of the show during his scenes. Smoother movements, slightly different shading, and subtle alterations to the background elements. These animation differences aren't merely stylistic choices, but narrative clues suggesting he exists on a different plane of reality than other characters. His home dimension might have unique visual properties that bleed through whenever he appears, similar to how characters from different animation styles maintain their visual distinctiveness when crossing over between shows. What makes the mystery of the Poopybutthole dimension particularly intriguing is how it challenges our understanding of the show's multiverse rules. Throughout Rick and Morty, we're repeatedly shown that infinite realities mean infinite possibilities. Yet somehow, the possibility of visiting a dimension of Poopybuttholes is conspicuously absent. This exception to the established pattern suggests there must be significant in-universe reasons why this particular corner of the multiverse remains unexplored, potentially tied to the larger mysteries of the Central Finite Curve and the true nature of reality within the show. The absence of a Poopybutthole dimension could also be connected to the mysterious nature of Mr. Poopybutthole himself. What if he isn't just from another dimension but something more fundamental to the structure of the multiverse? His meta-awareness and ability to predict future seasons suggest he might exist outside the normal flow of reality, perhaps as some kind of multiversal constant. an entity that remains consistent across all possible dimensions rather than having variant versions of himself. Looking closer at the Total Recall episode reveals something truly strange about Mr. Poopybuthole's existence that goes beyond a simple plot anomaly. The memory parasite's rules were explicitly established. These creatures could only create positive memories, never negative ones. This limitation became their undoing, as the Smith family used negative memory recall as a foolproof detection method. Yet Mr. Poopybutthole somehow creates a paradox within this framework. The contradictions stack up when we examine the episode's internal logic. Every character introduced during the episode was ultimately revealed to be a parasite, except for Mr. Poopybutthole. Yet the family had no negative memories of him whatsoever, which should have been impossible for a genuine long-term relationship. Think about it. Even the closest family members have occasional disagreements, disappointing moments, or minor conflicts. The complete absence of bad memories with Mr. Poopybutthole violates the established rules while still allowing him to be real. This anomaly becomes even more fascinating when we consider Beth's reaction after shooting him. Her immediate horror and subsequent guilt weren't just shock at making a mistake. They represented a profound emotional response to harming someone she genuinely believed was part of their lives. Beth's emotional breakdown in the hospital waiting room wasn't just guilt. It was the cognitive dissonance of reconciling her memories with the reality before her. The family truly remembered him as part of their history, even though viewers had never seen him before this episode. One compelling theory is that Mr. Poopybutthole possesses a natural ability to integrate himself into others' memories, but without the malicious intent or limitations of the parasites. Perhaps he can naturally influence or insert himself into memory structures, explaining how he established himself in family memories without triggering their parasite detection systems. This natural ability would represent a more evolved, nuanced version of what the parasites do crudely. What makes this even more intriguing is how it connects to his fourth wall awareness. Perhaps Mr. Poopybuthole's memory-influencing abilities and his meta-awareness are different expressions of the same fundamental trait: the ability to exist partially outside conventional reality. His consciousness might operate on a higher dimensional plane, allowing him to perceive and interact with both the show's internal universe and our external one simultaneously. This would explain why the parasite detection method didn't work on him. He wasn't subject to the same rules that governed the parasites because he exists outside the conventional framework of the show's reality. It's not that he passed the test, it's that the test wasn't applicable to his unique form of existence. This theory gains strength when we consider his ability to predict future seasons and speak directly to the audience, suggesting a perspective that transcends normal narrative constraints. The evidence supports the possibility that Mr. Poopybutthole might be a different class of interdimensional entity entirely. While the parasites hijack reality by manipulating memory, Mr. Poopybutthole might naturally exist across multiple planes of reality simultaneously. His yellow coloration, distinctly different from most characters, might visually signify this transcendent status, marking him as something fundamentally different from both humans and other aliens in the show. We can also connect his parasite immunity to other unique characters in the series. Characters like the testicle monsters who exist outside of time, or beings from dimensions with fundamentally different physics, share this quality of transcending the normal rules of the show's universe. Yet Mr. Poopybutthole is distinct even among these exceptions, as he specifically defies narrative conventions rather than just physical laws. This immunity to conventional narrative rules makes his presence particularly significant within the story structure. His survival in Total Recall wasn't just a throwaway joke or a random exception. It was potentially the single biggest clue about his true nature that the show has given us. The writers deliberately established rules about memory and reality, only to have this one character completely defy them while still remaining real within the universe. The narrative structure of the episode itself supports this reading. Total Recall is fundamentally about distinguishing reality from deception, and Mr. Poopybutthole emerges as a third category. Neither a deception nor conventional reality, but something that exists at the boundary between fiction and truth. His presence challenges not just the characters' understanding of their world, but the audience's understanding of how the show's reality functions. What if Mr. Poopybutthole's value to Rick lies precisely in this ability to exist outside conventional rules. We've seen Rick seek out and utilize beings with unique properties throughout the series. Someone who naturally exists outside normal reality constraints would be an invaluable ally or research subject for a scientist obsessed with breaking through dimensional barriers. Perhaps Rick has protected or cultivated a relationship with Mr. Poopybutthole specifically because he represents a naturally occurring example of transcendent existence. This immunity might also explain why Mr. Poopybutthole has a natural ability to implant himself in others' memories without being a parasite. His transcendent nature allows him to influence memory structures without triggering the defensive mechanisms that would normally identify external manipulation. He doesn't create false memories so much as he naturally exists within the memory framework of those around him. We might even speculate that his natural immunity to memory manipulation makes him valuable in ways the series hasn't yet revealed. In a multiverse where identity and reality are constantly in flux, someone who maintains consistent existence across dimensional boundaries would be a rare and valuable constant. For Rick, who often struggles with existential questions about identity across infinite realities, Mr. Poopybutthole might represent something unique, a being who maintains a consistent self despite the chaos of the multiverse. The structure of the Total Recall episode itself offers clues to this interpretation. The episode builds a clear set of rules about memory and reality, only to have this single character completely defy them. This isn't just a plot hole, it's a deliberate narrative choice that invites the audience to question their assumptions about how reality functions within the show. Mr. Poopybutthole's exception to the rule is the thematic heart of the episode, not a quirky aside. His survival becomes even more meaningful when we consider that he was originally meant to be killed off but became a fan favorite. The writers transformed what could have been a one-off joke character into a recurring meta-commentator on the series, suggesting that his narrative significance grew beyond their initial intentions. This evolution mirrors his in-universe transcendence, a character who was meant to be confined to a single episode's logic, but instead broke through to become something more significant. Looking at Mr. Poopybutthole's appearances across seasons reveals subtle connections that reinforce this reading. His post-Total Recall appearances often coincide with episodes that deal with themes of reality, memory, and identity. He serves as a visual callback to the show's exploration of these philosophical questions, appearing at moments when the boundary between different types of reality becomes most permeable. Time doesn't seem to work the same way for Mr. Poopybutthole as it does for everyone else in Rick and Morty. In fact, he might be the only character in the entire show who actually experiences the passage of time in a way that mirrors our own reality. If you pay close attention across the seasons, you'll notice something remarkable. While the Smith family remains frozen in their respective ages year after year, Mr. Poopybutthole undergoes dramatic life changes. He visibly ages, uses a walking cane after his injury, gets married, has a child, and even advances his career to become a college professor. This temporal anomaly is perhaps the most fascinating aspect of his character. The Smith family has encountered countless temporal paradoxes, visited different timelines, and even experienced time slowing to a near standstill in certain dimensions, yet they never physically age. Their experiences simply accumulate while their bodies remain static. Mr. Poopybutthole, however, moves through time in a linear fashion, his body changing to reflect the years that have passed both within the show and in our world during production breaks. The contrast is striking when you see Mr. Poopybutthole's progression from season to season. His initial appearance showed him as spry and energetic. After being shot, we see him in physical therapy, struggling with rehabilitation. Later seasons show him with a cane, then married, then with a child, and eventually as a professor with a more mature demeanor. Each appearance marks not just character development but physical transformation, something virtually unheard of in adult animation where characters typically remain frozen in time regardless of how many seasons pass. This unique relationship with time extends beyond just his physical appearance. Mr. Poopybutthole seems to have an uncanny awareness of the show's production schedule, an awareness that transcends the fourth wall. His end-of-season messages to the audience include remarkably specific predictions about when new episodes will air, often matching the actual real-world production timeline with eerie accuracy. While this could be written off as just a meta joke, it becomes more significant when viewed alongside his physical aging. Both suggest he experiences time differently than other characters. The implications are fascinating. Perhaps Mr. Poopybutthole exists in a liminal space between the fictional world of the show and our real world. His consciousness might partially extend into our reality, allowing him to perceive not just the events within the show, but also the production process that creates it. This would explain why he ages according to our timeline rather than the show's internal timeline, and why he can predict production schedules with such accuracy. He might be experiencing both realities simultaneously, aging in sync with our world while interacting with characters who remain temporally static. This theory gains further credibility when we consider the Central Finite Curve, the collection of realities where Rick is the smartest being in the universe. If Mr. Poopybutthole exists outside this artificial boundary, time might flow differently for him. The rules that govern reality within the curve, including the animation stasis that keeps characters the same age, might not apply to beings from beyond it. His aging could be a visual representation of his existence outside the normal temporal constraints of the show's primary setting. The way Mr. Poopybutthole experiences time might also serve as a symbolic reflection of the show's own evolution. As the series has matured and developed more complex narratives and character arcs, Mr. Poopybutthole has grown alongside it. His transformation from a seemingly one-dimensional character to a married professor with a family parallels the show's progression from a relatively straightforward sci-fi comedy to a multi-layered exploration of existentialism, family dynamics, and meta-narrative. In this sense, he functions as a physical embodiment of the show's maturation process. There's another intriguing possibility to consider. What if Mr. Poopybuthole's relationship with time is connected to the show's broader mythology about temporal manipulation? Rick and Morty has established multiple forms of time travel and temporal distortion, from the time cops to the fourth-dimensional beings who exist outside normal time. Mr. Poopybuthole's unique temporal experience might not be just a quirk, but a deliberate clue about his connection to these greater cosmic forces. Perhaps his species naturally experiences time differently, perceiving it as flowing linearly, while others experience it as cyclical or static. His accelerated aging could also reflect something fundamental about his species or origin. If he comes from a reality where time flows differently, his physical changes might appear accelerated from our perspective. What looks like aging to us might be a natural life cycle that operates on a different temporal scale. This would explain why he moves through major life stages, recovery, marriage, parenthood, career advancement, at a pace that seems quick compared to the unchanging Smith family. The production team has never explicitly stated whether Mr. Poopybuthole's relationship with time was planned as part of a larger narrative arc. However, his consistent progression across seasons suggests this aspect of his character is deliberate rather than accidental. The writers have used his temporal awareness to comment on production delays and set expectations for future seasons, turning what could have been merely a breakout character into a unique narrative device that bridges the gap between fiction and reality. This temporal difference makes Mr. Poopybutthole uniquely valuable within the show's universe. Most characters are tethered to their respective timelines, experiencing reality as a fixed progression of events. Even Rick, with all his dimension-hopping abilities, doesn't seem to age or change physically across seasons. Mr. Poopybuthole's ability to perceive and move through time differently potentially gives him insights that even Rick doesn't possess, perhaps explaining why Rick seems to respect him, despite his seemingly simple nature. The theory that Mr. Poopybutthole exists partially in our reality also explains why his predictions about the show's future are so accurate. It's not just fourth wall breaking for comedy's sake. He genuinely knows when new episodes will air because he experiences the production timeline alongside the audience. This connection to our world might be why he addresses viewers directly at season finales, serving as a bridge between the fictional universe and the real-world production process. His heightened temporal awareness might also explain another mystery: how he survived the parasite incident despite having no negative memories associated with him. If he exists partially outside the show's normal reality, the rules that govern parasites might not apply to him in the same way. His perception of time might allow him to maintain his identity across dimensional boundaries in ways that parasites cannot replicate. The connections between Mr. Poopybutthole's temporal anomalies and the show's overarching themes about time manipulation suggest his character might be more central to the series' mythology than casual viewers realize. His aging process could be providing subtle clues about the nature of the multiverse and how time functions differently across dimensional boundaries. Perhaps he represents a glimpse of what exists beyond the artificial constraints of the Central Finite Curve, a reality where time flows naturally rather than remaining stagnant. The distinctive yellow portal that Evil Morty uses to escape the Central Finite Curve might be more than just a creative choice by the animation team. This striking visual element creates an unmistakable parallel with Mr. Poopybuthole's yellow appearance, suggesting a connection that most viewers have overlooked. It's fascinating how the same vibrant yellow hue appears at two pivotal moments in the series: when Evil Morty finally breaks free from Rick's manufactured multiverse, and in the distinctive character design of Mr. Poopybutthole. These visual parallels hint at a deeper narrative connection that goes beyond mere coincidence, potentially revealing an intentional thread woven by the show's creators to link these seemingly disparate characters. Both of these characters stand apart from everyone else in the Rick and Morty universe in remarkably similar ways. Evil Morty demonstrates an exceptional ability to operate outside Rick's sphere of influence, systematically dismantling the power structures that Rick has established across the multiverse. His calculated plan to escape the Central Finite Curve represents perhaps the most significant challenge to Rick's authority in the entire series. Simultaneously, Mr. Poopybutthole exhibits his own form of transcendence through his meta-awareness and fourth wall breaks, communicating directly with the audience in a way that bypasses the show's internal logic. These parallel abilities to transcend limitations suggest that both characters possess a fundamental understanding of the constructed nature of their reality. What makes this connection even more intriguing is examining how episodes featuring Mr. Poopybutthole often precede major developments in the Evil Morty storyline. When Mr. Poopybutthole first appears in Total Rickle, he introduces the concept that characters might exist outside the established understanding of the show's reality. This episode aired just before Close Rick Counters of the Rick Kind, which first revealed Evil Morty as a manipulator of Ricks. This pattern continues throughout the series. Mr. Poopybuthole's appearances often serve as conceptual preludes to Evil Morty's increasingly ambitious plans to break free from Rick's influence. It's worth considering whether these two characters might share an origin point somewhere beyond the Central Finite Curve. Evil Morty's escape through the yellow portal takes him to a region of the multiverse where Ricks don't dominate, a space that might be Mr. Poopybuthole's true home. This would explain several of Mr. Poopybuthole's anomalous traits, including his awareness of production schedules and his immunity to the mind parasite's abilities. Perhaps what we're seeing isn't just a visual connection, but evidence of two characters who originate from the same region of reality, a place where the rules that govern the rest of the show simply don't apply. The way both characters resist manipulation is particularly telling. Evil Morty's ability to shield his mind from detection by Rick technology demonstrates an unprecedented resistance to Rick's surveillance and control. This mirrors Mr. Poopybuthole's apparent immunity to the mind parasite's influence, suggesting both characters possess similar defensive capabilities against external mental interference. While their methods differ dramatically, Evil Morty actively fights against Rick's influence while Mr. Poopybutthole seems to passively exist beyond it. The end result is remarkably similar. Both maintain autonomy in a universe where Rick typically controls everything. Episodes that advance the Evil Morty storyline often contain subtle references or thematic connections to Mr. Poopybutthole, even when he doesn't physically appear. In The Ricklantis Mix-Up, which reveals Evil Morty's rise to power at the Citadel, there's a heightened focus on characters breaking free from predetermined roles, a theme that resonates with Mr. Poopybuthole's existence outside the show's conventional character framework. Later episodes dealing with the boundaries of the Central Finite Curve echo the same questions about reality's construction that Mr. Poopybuthole's fourth wall breaks have raised since his introduction. Looking at these characters from a narrative perspective, they represent two contrasting approaches to achieving freedom from established power structures. Evil Morty works within the system, methodically gaining control of the Citadel before ultimately destroying it to escape. His is a revolutionary approach, violently dismantling the structures that Rick created to maintain control. Mr. Poopybutthole, conversely, seems to have always existed partially outside these structures, operating with a quiet awareness of their limitations without directly challenging them. One character fights against the system while the other transcends it, different paths leading to similar states of independence from Rick's influence. This connection becomes even more compelling when we consider the timing of their significant moments in the series. Mr. Poopybutthole's most prominent fourth wall breaks often occur around the same time as major developments in Evil Morty's storyline, suggesting a synchronicity between these characters that transcends the show's internal chronology. When Evil Morty finally escapes the Central Finite Curve, it represents a fundamental shift in the show's conceptual framework, one that Mr. Poopybutthole has been hinting at through his meta-awareness since his introduction. The original conception of Evil Morty reportedly differed significantly from what was eventually revealed in the show. Early drafts positioned him not as a revolutionary figure seeking escape, but as a character who already understood the constructed nature of the show's reality, much like Mr. Poopybutthole. This earlier version of Evil Morty was meant to represent the ultimate consequence of a Morty becoming aware of his status as a fictional character, a concept that was later parceled out between different characters, including Mr. Poopybutthole. Elements of this meta-awareness were ultimately incorporated into Mr. Poopybuthole's character, while Evil Morty evolved into a more traditional antagonist, albeit one still defined by his desire to escape the limitations of his reality. This original conception reveals why there might be visual and conceptual parallels between these characters. They both retain aspects of this initial idea about characters who understand the artificial nature of their existence. While Evil Morty seeks to escape it physically by breaking through the Central Finite Curve, Mr. Poopybutthole transcends it conceptually by communicating directly with the audience. Their yellow connection serves as a visual reminder of this shared conceptual origin, even as their characters developed in different directions. Throughout the series, both characters demonstrate an unusual relationship with the show's established rules. Evil Morty systematically discovers and exploits the limitations of Rick's technology and influence, while Mr. Poopybutthole casually exists beyond many of the show's narrative constraints. Both characters seem to understand something fundamental about their reality that eludes others, including Rick himself. This shared insight manifests differently. Evil Morty's calculating rebellion versus Mr. Poopybutthole's gentle awareness, but stems from a similar recognition of the constructed nature of their world. These parallels raise fascinating questions about the ultimate goals of both characters. If Mr. Poopybutthole already exists partially outside the conventional rules of the Rick and Morty universe, might Evil Morty's escape bring him to a similar state of awareness? Or conversely, could Mr. Poopybutthole represent a preview of what Evil Morty might become once freed from the Central Finite Curve? A being who has made peace with the constructed nature of reality rather than fighting against it? Their shared visual connection through the color yellow suggests their stories may be heading toward a common destination, even as they approach it from radically different starting points. Mr. Poopybuthole's appearances throughout the series aren't just charming fourth wall breaks. They serve a much more deliberate purpose that most viewers might not immediately recognize. While Evil Morty's yellow portal suggests a physical escape from the Central Finite Curve, Mr. Poopybuthole's consistent presence at pivotal moments in the show's production timeline suggests he functions as something far more significant: the creator's direct communication channel during periods of transition and change. If you pay close attention to when Mr. Poopybutthole appears, particularly in season finales and premieres, you'll notice a remarkable pattern. These appearances aren't random but strategically positioned at moments when the show itself is experiencing significant behind-the-scenes transformation. His presence in key episodes like the Season 2 finale, Look Who's Purging Now, and the recent Season 7 premiere, How Poopy Got His Poop Back, coincides precisely with major shifts in production realities, not just narrative ones. What makes this especially fascinating is how his fourth wall breaks function completely differently from Rick's meta-commentary. When Rick acknowledges the fictional nature of the show, he's performing a character bit, essentially making jokes about being in a TV show while remaining firmly within that fiction. Mr. Poopybutthole, however, seems to exist in a liminal space between worlds. He doesn't just acknowledge the show as fiction. He speaks directly about real-world production timelines and the show's relationship with its audience. He's not breaking character to do this. This is his character. This distinction is crucial. Rick's meta-jokes serve the comedy and reinforce his character as someone smart enough to realize he's in a fictional universe. Mr. Poopybutthole's direct addresses serve a more practical purpose. They're the creator's way of managing audience expectations during periods when the show itself is undergoing transformation. His seemingly innocuous comments about a year and a half or longer aren't just cute predictions. They're carefully crafted statements that prepare viewers for real production delays. This buffer function becomes especially valuable during turbulent production periods. When the show faced significant behind-the-scenes challenges, like the lengthy delay between seasons 3 and 4 due to contract negotiations, or most recently, the dramatic recasting of the main voice actors for season 7, Mr. Poopybutthole appeared as if on cue. His presence during these transitions allows the writers to address production realities without disrupting the internal logic of the show's universe. The most compelling evidence for this theory comes from the season 7 premiere, where Mr. Poopybutthole's storyline about dealing with the aftermath of his life choices and relationship challenges serves as a perfect metaphor for the show's own production journey. As the character navigates personal transformation, the show itself was undergoing perhaps its most significant change, replacing the voice of its titular characters. Rather than addressing this directly in a way that might break immersion, the writers cleverly used Mr. Poopybutthole's story as a proxy discussion about change, adaptation, and moving forward. This pattern extends beyond just production schedules. Mr. Poopybuthole's life changes between seasons. His aging, marriage, career progression, and personal struggles often metaphorically represent the show's own evolution. His recovery from injury parallels the show recovering from production difficulties. His marriage and fatherhood mirror the show's maturation from its early, more chaotic seasons to the more structured storytelling of later seasons. His career as a professor reflects the show's growing confidence in addressing more complex philosophical themes. When viewed from this perspective, Mr. Poopybutthole emerges as something far more significant than just a recurring character. He functions as an avatar for the writers themselves. Through him, the creative team can communicate directly with the audience without breaking the show's established reality. This explains why his fourth wall breaks feel fundamentally different from Rick's. They're not just a character acknowledging fiction, they're the creators establishing a direct line to their audience during critical transitions. This approach to meta-commentary isn't entirely unique to Rick and Morty, though. Dan Harmon, one of the show's co-creators, has consistently used similar narrative devices throughout his career. In Community, another Harmon creation, the character Abed serves a comparable function, a meta-aware figure who comments on the show's structure while remaining within it. Both characters provide a framework for the writers to communicate with viewers about the nature of the show itself, without completely shattering the fourth wall. What's particularly interesting about this connection is how both characters evolved from relatively minor roles into essential components of their respective show's mythology. Just as Abed's meta-awareness became central to Community's identity, Mr. Poopybuthole's function as a bridge between realities has become increasingly important to Rick and Morty's structure. His appearances now signal not just transitions between seasons, but often herald tonal shifts or new directions for upcoming storylines. This pattern becomes even more apparent when examining how Mr. Poopybuthole's appearances align with significant changes in the show's narrative direction. When the series needed to signal a shift toward more serialized storytelling with the Evil Morty arc, Mr. Poopybutthole appeared. When the show wanted to move away from certain elements toward new creative territory, he showed up again. He consistently functions as a harbinger of creative evolution within the series. The show's creators use this character as a strategic narrative tool, particularly during periods when they need to prepare audiences for significant changes. His unique position partially outside the show's internal reality makes him perfect for this role. He can address production realities that other characters cannot acknowledge without breaking the show's internal coherence. His meta-awareness allows the writers to comment on the show's structure, production challenges, and creative direction while maintaining narrative cohesion. What does this tell us about Mr. Poopybutthole's ultimate purpose in the series? If his primary function is to serve as a messenger during periods of transition, his increasing prominence might suggest something significant about the show's future. As Rick and Morty continues to evolve, Mr. Poopybuthole's role as a bridge between fictional and real-world considerations may become even more vital, particularly as the series eventually moves toward its conclusion. His appearances might not just be commenting on current production realities, but potentially preparing viewers for the show's eventual ending. If Mr. Poopybutthole has consistently served as the creator's voice during transitions, his most important function may still lie ahead, helping audiences navigate the series' final chapter whenever it arrives. His meta-awareness makes him uniquely positioned to guide viewers through what would inevitably be a significant transition for a show with such cultural impact. This interpretation casts every one of his fourth wall-breaking moments in a new light. They're not just cute asides or bonus content for fans. They're carefully constructed narrative devices that help manage the relationship between the show and its audience during periods of change. Mr. Poopybutthole doesn't just break the fourth wall. He serves as a doorway between worlds, allowing the creators to speak directly to viewers without undermining the show's internal reality. Beyond his narrative function as a bridge between worlds, the most revealing aspect of Mr. Poopybutthole might be something far more obvious: the way he's physically drawn on screen. His animation style contains subtle differences that separate him from every other character in Rick and Morty's universe, and these visual distinctions might be the creator's most direct hint about his true nature and purpose. If you look closely at Mr. Poopybutthole in any scene he appears in, you'll notice something odd about his movements. While Rick and Morty characters typically have a certain stiffness to their animation, that signature, slightly jerky motion that's part of the show's aesthetic, Mr. Poopybutthole moves with an unusually fluid grace. His motions have a smoothness that feels almost out of place, as if he's being animated at a different frame rate than everyone else. This isn't just a random stylistic choice. It's a visual signifier that he fundamentally exists differently than other characters. The color palette used for Mr. Poopybutthole is also subtly distinct. His yellow tone isn't just any yellow. It's specifically a shade that stands out against the show's normal color scheme. While most characters in Rick and Morty have colors that blend naturally with their environments, Mr. Poopybuthole's yellow seems to pop forward visually, almost as if he's been superimposed onto the scene rather than existing within it. This creates a subtle visual dissonance that our brains register even if we don't consciously acknowledge it. What's particularly interesting is how the backgrounds sometimes shift when Mr. Poopybutthole is present. Pay attention to scenes where he appears, and you might notice subtle changes in lighting, slightly different physics in how objects move, or even minor alterations in the background details. These changes are extremely subtle, not enough to be distracting, but sufficient to create a subconscious feeling that something is different about the reality when he's in it. His design simplicity is another visual anomaly worth noting. In a show filled with complex alien designs featuring multiple eyes, limbs, and bizarre anatomical features, Mr. Poopybutthole stands out through his minimalism. His pill-shaped body and simple features feel almost deliberately basic, as if he were drawn by a different artist with a different sensibility. This simplicity makes him feel like an animation from another era or style that has somehow wandered into Rick and Morty's universe. The animation techniques employed specifically for Mr. Poopybutthole scenes differ in other subtle ways too. There's often a slight change in the line quality used to draw him. His outlines sometimes appear just a touch cleaner or more precise than the characters around him. This creates a visual separation that reinforces his otherworldly nature without being obvious enough to break the viewer's immersion. When watching Mr. Poopybutthole speak, there's another layer to his distinctive presence. His voice acting has a quality that separates him from the rest of the cast. The pitch, cadence, and emotional range all contribute to making him feel like he's performing in a slightly different register than everyone else. It's as if his voice is coming from a place that's not quite the same reality as the other characters. These animation anomalies might be referencing a long tradition in cartoons of characters who exist outside their show's normal reality. Characters like Bugs Bunny, who break the fourth wall, often have slightly different animation properties than the characters who remain unaware they're in a cartoon. Mr. Poopybutthole follows in this tradition, but with a modern, subtle twist that fits Rick and Morty's more sophisticated approach to meta-commentary. The backgrounds in scenes featuring Mr. Poopybutthole sometimes contain hidden visual messages or patterns that don't appear elsewhere in the show. These aren't obvious Easter eggs, but rather subtle visual motifs that recur whenever he's present. Certain shapes in the background, specific color combinations, or particular lighting effects. These visual cues might be establishing a subliminal connection between all of his appearances, suggesting a consistent, other reality that he brings with him. As the series has progressed, the animation techniques used for Mr. Poopybutthole have evolved alongside the show's overall visual style. In earlier appearances, the distinctions were more subtle, but as the show's animation quality has improved over the seasons, the animators have been able to incorporate more sophisticated techniques to distinguish him. The smoother movements, slightly different color palette, and unique design elements have become more refined and intentional, suggesting that his visual distinctiveness is indeed a deliberate narrative choice rather than a coincidence. The evolution of these animation techniques parallels Mr. Poopybuthole's growing importance to the show's meta-narrative. As his role has expanded from a one-off joke character to a recurring fourth wall breaker to a character with his own developing storyline, the visual signifiers of his special nature have become more pronounced. This suggests a deliberate choice by the animators to reinforce his unique position through visual means. What makes these animation differences particularly significant is that animation is a medium where nothing happens by accident. Every frame, every color choice, and every movement is planned and executed deliberately. When a character consistently displays visual anomalies across multiple episodes and seasons, it's almost certainly an intentional choice meant to communicate something important about that character's nature. The animation techniques used specifically for Mr. Poopybutthole suggest he might exist in a liminal space between different layers of reality. Not fully in the show's world, not fully in our world, but somehow spanning both. His visual distinctiveness serves as a constant reminder that he doesn't quite belong in the same reality as the other characters, reinforcing his narrative function as a bridge between worlds. These visual clues aren't just artistic flourishes, they're fundamental to understanding Mr. Poopybuthole's true nature. In a medium where visual language is as important as spoken dialogue, the way a character is animated tells us as much about them as what they say or do. Mr. Poopybuthole's animation anomalies aren't just telling us he's different. They're showing us exactly how he's different, if we pay close enough attention. As the show continues to evolve, paying attention to how Mr. Poopybutthole is animated might provide the earliest clues about major shifts in the series' direction. His visual distinctiveness has consistently signaled his special relationship with the show's narrative structure, and changes in how he's animated might foreshadow changes in the show itself. The strategic timing of Mr. Poopybuthole's appearances during season finales reveals something far deeper than simply a cute, fourth-wall-breaking tradition. Looking closely at the Season 5 finale, his appearance coincided with one of the most significant shifts in the show's entire narrative direction. This wasn't coincidental. It was purposeful foreshadowing. When examining these finale appearances collectively, they form a pattern that suggests Mr. Poopybutthole isn't just commenting on production schedules, but subtly preparing viewers for how the entire series might conclude. His meta-awareness allows him to function as both participant and observer in a way that even Rick, with all his genius, cannot achieve. What makes this theory particularly compelling is how accurately Mr. Poopybutthole has predicted not just when new seasons will air, but also the general direction the show would take. His commentary often aligns precisely with the real-world production timeline challenges that the creative team faces. For instance, his specific timeframes about when new seasons will be released match the actual production schedules with uncanny precision. This isn't just a cute gimmick or a random coincidence. It suggests a character who exists partially in our reality and partially within the show's fiction, making him uniquely positioned to understand the complete narrative arc of Rick and Morty in ways that remain hidden from other characters. The show's creators seem to be using Mr. Poopybutthole as a communication tool with the audience, particularly during turbulent production periods. As noted in the research, he functions as a buffer between the show's internal reality and the audience's external reality, especially during turbulent production periods. This makes him invaluable not just as comic relief, but as a narrative device that helps bridge the gap between fiction and reality. His meta-awareness connects him to other characters in Dan Harmon's work, who serve similar functions, establishing a pattern across Harmon's creative universe of characters who understand their own fictional nature. Mr. Poopybutthole's ability to address the audience directly offers insights into the show's creative process and the challenges faced by the writers and animators. This technique allows the show to acknowledge its own limitations and engage in self-critique, fostering a deeper connection with viewers. It's not just breaking the fourth wall for comedic effect. It's using this character to prepare the audience for major shifts in direction and tone that would otherwise feel jarring or disconnected. Notice how the production challenges and evolution of Rick and Morty over time are subtly mirrored in Mr. Poopybutthole's character development. His physical changes throughout the series might symbolize the show's maturation. This consistent aging contrasts with the static nature of the Smith family, suggesting that as the show progresses toward its eventual conclusion, Mr. Poopybutthole serves as the timekeeper marking this journey. His transformation from a seemingly disposable gag character to professor to family man parallels the show's own evolution from simple sci-fi comedy to a more complex exploration of existential themes and family dynamics. This progression isn't random. It appears deliberately crafted to signal the show's movement toward an eventual endgame. In particular, the research notes that Mr. Poopybuthole's physical changes throughout the series, such as using a cane, getting married, and having a child, might be symbolic of the show's evolution and maturation over time. These aren't just character developments. They're meta-commentary on the show's own journey. Most intriguingly, the creators have hinted at Mr. Poopybuthole's importance in the series' conclusion. His season finale appearances might be breadcrumbs leading to the series' conclusion, with his character development possibly mirroring the show's own maturation toward an eventual conclusion. This progression suggests he'll play a crucial role in the show's final act, perhaps as narrator, guide, or even a key player in resolving the central conflicts. While the creators haven't explicitly revealed their planned ending for Rick and Morty, the consistent accuracy of Mr. Poopybuthole's predictions and his meta-commentary hint at a carefully constructed narrative arc. His existence partially outside the show's reality might allow him to see the complete narrative arc that even Rick cannot perceive. This awareness makes him uniquely positioned to provide clues about the ultimate direction of the series, foreshadowing major developments before they occur. According to the research, Mr. Poopybutthole might be aware of the show's planned ending, dropping subtle hints about where the narrative is ultimately heading. This awareness isn't just about production schedules. It suggests a character who understands the complete narrative trajectory of Rick and Morty, including how it will eventually conclude. His meta-awareness serves as a narrative device to prepare viewers for the show's conclusion, providing subtle clues that enhance the viewing experience. One of the most fascinating aspects of this theory is how it connects to the show's central themes of determinism versus free will. In a multiverse where infinite possibilities exist simultaneously, Mr. Poopybutthole represents something uniquely constant. His understanding of future events raises questions about whether the characters' journeys are predetermined or whether true choice exists even in a narrative framework. This philosophical dimension adds depth to his character beyond simple fourth-wall breaks. Theories about the show's eventual conclusion suggest Mr. Poopybutthole could be the ultimate witness to Rick and Morty's adventures. The research explores the idea that he might be the only truly immortal character in the series, existing beyond the constraints of dimension, time, and narrative. His consistent survival despite the show's tendency to kill off characters suggests he might be protected by narrative forces beyond even Rick's control. This protection points to his importance in the show's endgame. He might be the one to outlive all other characters, serving as the final observer of the series' resolution. What's particularly compelling is how Mr. Poopybuthole's appearances become more significant as the series progresses. His brief cameos in early seasons have evolved into more substantial appearances with greater narrative weight. This increasing prominence suggests his role is growing in importance as the show moves toward its conclusion. His appearances in season finales might be carefully placed signposts guiding viewers toward understanding the show's ultimate destination. The consistent pattern of his appearances in season finales, often coinciding with major shifts in the show's direction, suggests deliberate planning rather than coincidence. The research notes that his appearances in season finales, such as the one in season 5, have been linked to major plot developments and the introduction of new story arcs. This pattern implies that Mr. Poopybutthole isn't just a recurring character, but a narrative device used to signal important transitions in the show's evolution. While fans have developed numerous theories about how Rick and Morty might eventually end, Mr. Poopybutthole's unique position as both character and meta-commentator makes him ideally suited to play a crucial role in that conclusion. His ability to exist partially outside the show's narrative constraints allows him to provide perspective that no other character can offer, potentially making him the key to understanding the show's ultimate message. In a series defined by its exploration of infinite possibilities and existential meaninglessness, one character stands apart from all others, not through extraordinary powers or central placement in the narrative, but through his unique relationship with both the story and the audience. Unlike our favorite scientist who has been killed and replaced multiple times, Mr. Poopybutthole has survived every threat the multiverse has thrown at him, even being shot point-blank by Beth. This remarkable resilience raises an intriguing possibility. What if Mr. Poopybutthole isn't merely surviving by chance, but because he serves a more fundamental purpose within the narrative structure of Rick and Morty? The series has established that Rick C-137, our main Rick, has faced death and replacement numerous times throughout the show. The Season 5 finale, Rick Mirai Jack, reveals that Rick Prime, the antagonist who murdered Diane and Beth in multiple universes, has been a driving force behind Rick's trauma and quest for revenge. This underscores a crucial point. Even the most powerful character in the multiverse faces mortality and replacement. Yet amid this cosmic chaos of dying Ricks and shifting identities, Mr. Poopybutthole remains constant, aging naturally, and building a life that progresses meaningfully across seasons. This stark contrast between Rick's replaceable nature and Mr. Poopybuthole's consistency suggests that the latter might be fulfilling the role of the immortal observer, a witness to the grand cosmic narrative that unfolds across the multiverse. While Rick jumps between dimensions and faces constant threats to his existence, Mr. Poopybutthole appears immune to the fundamental instability that defines existence in Rick and Morty. This immunity doesn't stem from incredible power or superior technology, but from something more fundamental: his position partially outside the core narrative structure. Think about it. In a show where characters routinely die and get replaced by alternate versions of themselves, Mr. Poopybutthole has experienced something none of the other characters do: continuous growth and development. From his introduction as a family friend to his recovery from Beth's gunshot, to his marriage, fatherhood, and career as a professor, his life follows a coherent progression that mirrors our own experience of time. This suggests that he might be experiencing reality in a fundamentally different way than the other characters within the show's universe. What makes this particularly interesting is how it positions Mr. Poopybutthole as potentially the ultimate chronicler of Rick and Morty's adventures. In many narrative traditions, immortal observers serve as the custodians of stories, preserving them across time. Consider how Mr. Poopybuthole's unique position allows him to comment not just on events within the show, but on the show itself. His fourth wall breaks aren't merely cute gags, but might be hints that he's actually narrating these events from some point in the future, perhaps long after the adventures of Rick C-137 have concluded. This interpretation gains weight when we consider the growing family and legacy Mr. Poopybutthole has established over the course of the series. His marriage, the birth of his child, and his career development aren't just character beats. They represent the cultivation of something Rick consistently fails to achieve: a meaningful life built on connection rather than nihilistic adventure. In this way, Mr. Poopybuthole's family might symbolically represent the show's cultural impact and growing fan base, creating something lasting that extends beyond the boundaries of the original narrative. The show's creators have not explicitly revealed long-term plans for Mr. Poopybutthole, but his recurring appearances and meta-commentary suggest a significant role beyond a simple gag character. His ability to break the fourth wall and comment on the show's production and future seasons positions him as an observer of the series' events, potentially outlasting other characters and offering a unique perspective on the show's themes and direction. This meta-awareness sets up the fascinating possibility that Mr. Poopybutthole might be setting the stage for a future spin-off or continuation after the main story of Rick and Morty concludes. Consider the role of immortal observer characters in fiction more broadly. Such characters witness the events of a narrative from a detached perspective, often outliving the protagonists and providing commentary on the nature of the story itself. Mr. Poopybuthole's consistent survival and aging across seasons, while other characters remain relatively static, suggests that he experiences time differently. This unique relationship with time and his ability to break the fourth wall align with the concept of an immortal observer who witnesses the events of the series from a detached perspective. Perhaps most significantly, Mr. Poopybuthole's existence presents a direct challenge to the show's predominantly nihilistic themes. While Rick constantly reminds us that nothing matters in an infinite multiverse, Mr. Poopybutthole demonstrates the opposite through his actions. He recovers from trauma, builds relationships, starts a family, pursues education, and develops a career, all while fully aware of the constructed nature of his reality. In a universe where meaning is supposedly impossible to find, he finds it anyway, suggesting that purpose can exist even within a fictional framework. The contrast between Rick and Mr. Poopybutthole becomes even more stark when we consider their respective fates throughout the series. Rick C-137, our protagonist, has faced death and replacement multiple times across seasons. In the Season 6 premiere, Solarix, we even see a robot version of Rick used to deceive the Smith family, a robot programmed to care more than the original. This exploration of Rick's replacements emphasizes the instability of identity within the multiverse. Meanwhile, Mr. Poopybutthole maintains his consistent identity and growth trajectory. This suggests something profound. In a show obsessed with nihilism and meaninglessness, Mr. Poopybutthole might be the only character who actually matters. While Rick C-137 pursues revenge against Rick Prime for murdering his family across multiple realities, Mr. Poopybutthole quietly builds a life of meaning and purpose, challenging the very philosophical foundation the show is built upon. His refusal to succumb to nihilism, despite understanding the constructed nature of his reality, makes him not just a surviving character, but a philosophically significant one. The possibility of spin-offs or continuations of Rick and Morty involving Mr. Poopybutthole gains credibility when we consider his unique role in the series. His meta-commentary and awareness of the show's narrative structure could allow him to serve as a narrator or chronicler of the series from a future perspective. The showrunner has mentioned plans for a full 10-season saga, which could provide opportunities for Mr. Poopybutthole to play a more significant role in the show's future. What initially appeared to be a throwaway gag character might actually be the most profound commentary on storytelling within the series. Mr. Poopybutthole reminds us that even in a fictional construct, meaning can be created through connection, growth, and purpose. His seemingly minor role might ultimately prove to be the philosophical heart of Rick and Morty, a demonstration that even in a universe of infinite possibilities and cosmic meaninglessness, the choice to create meaning remains. Let's take a closer look at Evil Morty's first appearance in the show, because it's actually a masterclass in subtle storytelling. When close Rick counters of the Rick kind first aired, most viewers had no idea they were witnessing the introduction of one of the series' most important characters. Evil Morty initially appeared as just another background character, a Morty with an eye patch who seemed to be yet another victim of Rick's mistreatment across the multiverse. This was completely intentional on the part of the creators, who crafted his introduction to be easily overlooked amidst the chaos of the episode's main plot. The genius of this episode lies in how it presents Evil Morty as someone seemingly insignificant. Most viewers were naturally focused on Evil Rick as the episode's primary antagonist, which was exactly what the writers wanted. The entire storyline about the Council of Ricks investigating the murders of other Ricks across dimensions created the perfect smokescreen for Evil Morty's true role. We're so busy watching the Council's pursuit, and Rick C-137's attempts to clear his name that this quiet Morty with an eye patch barely registers as important. It's only in the episode's final moments that we get the shocking reveal. Evil Rick was actually being controlled remotely, and the puppet master was none other than the innocent-looking eye patch Morty. What makes this reveal so effective is how it completely subverts our expectations about the Rick-Morty relationship dynamic. Up until this point, the show had firmly established that Ricks are the geniuses and Mortys are the followers. This sudden reversal, a Morty controlling a Rick, immediately signaled that this character was something entirely different, challenging everything we thought we knew about the power balance within the show's universe. The fact that most viewers didn't see it coming only made the twist more impactful. The creators didn't leave this revelation to chance, though. Throughout the episode, they planted visual clues that most viewers completely missed on their first viewing. These subtle details in Evil Morty's animation set him apart from the crowd of other Mortys. His expressions and movements were different, more calculated and deliberate than the nervous energy we typically see from Mortys. His gaze was more intense, his posture more confident. These animation differences weren't obvious enough to give away the twist, but were carefully designed to reward attentive viewers who would later rewatch the episode after knowing his true identity. Perhaps one of the most brilliant aspects of Evil Morty's introduction was the music that accompanied his reveal. The haunting piano notes of "For the Damaged Coda" by Blonde Redhead created an instant audio signature for the character. This musical choice was so effective that it became permanently associated with Evil Morty, returning in his subsequent appearances to signal his presence and create an immediate sense of tension. The melancholy yet menacing tone of the song perfectly captures the character's complex nature. A Morty who has broken free from Rick's control but has potentially become something even darker in the process. What's fascinating about Evil Morty as a character is how the writers constructed him to function as a perfect foil to C-137 Morty. He represents an alternate path, showing what any Morty might become under different circumstances. While our Morty struggles with his relationship with Rick but ultimately remains loyal, Evil Morty has completely rejected the established order. This contrast raises profound questions about free will versus determinism in the show. Is our Morty's path predetermined? Or could he potentially become like Evil Morty under the right conditions? This philosophical underpinning gives the character a depth that transcends typical villain tropes. The show's creators didn't just introduce Evil Morty as a one-off villain either. His first appearance laid the groundwork for what would become one of the show's most compelling long-term narrative arcs. While Rick and Morty is largely episodic, the Evil Morty storyline represents one of the show's few continuing plots that would span multiple seasons, adding a layer of continuity that rewards longtime viewers. This initial introduction was carefully designed to plant seeds that would grow throughout the series, demonstrating the creators' commitment to building a complex mythology alongside the show's more self-contained adventures. What many viewers don't realize is that the seeds for Evil Morty may have been planted even earlier than his first on-screen appearance. The pilot episode actually contains subtle foreshadowing that most fans completely missed until rewatching after later seasons. Background characters and seemingly throwaway dialogue lines hint at a larger multiverse where the typical Rick-Morty dynamic has been disrupted. These early Easter eggs show just how meticulously planned Evil Morty's character arc was from the very beginning of the series, rather than being a later addition. The careful construction of Evil Morty's character extends beyond just the narrative elements. The animation team gave special attention to distinguishing him from other Mortys in ways that are subtle but significant. His animation features unique expressions that convey intelligence and calculation, rather than the anxiety and uncertainty we see in most Mortys. His movements are more controlled and purposeful, lacking the characteristic nervous energy of the Morty we know. These animation details weren't random choices, but deliberate decisions to visually establish Evil Morty as something different from what we'd seen before, even before his true nature was revealed. What makes Evil Morty such a compelling character from his very first appearance is that he challenges the fundamental power structure of the show's universe. In a multiverse where Ricks dominate and Mortys serve, he represents something unprecedented. A Morty who has not only freed himself from Rick's control, but has actually reversed the relationship entirely. This makes him more than just a villain. He's a revolutionary figure who questions the natural order as established by the show. Whether viewers see him as a hero or villain often depends on their perspective on the Rick-Morty relationship itself. The revelation of Evil Morty as the true mastermind behind the events of close Rick counters of the Rick kind wasn't just a shocking plot twist. It was a statement about the show's willingness to subvert its own established rules. By revealing that a Morty could be more dangerous and calculating than a Rick, the show opened up new narrative possibilities and suggested that the multiverse was even more complex and unpredictable than we initially thought. This laid the foundation for future explorations of the Rick-Morty relationship and the nature of the multiverse itself. The multiverse established a clear hierarchy. Rick's lead, Morty's follow. But somewhere in the infinite possibilities, one Morty decided to rewrite this fundamental rule. What specifically pushed evil Morty beyond his programming, while our Morty, despite suffering similar abuse, remains loyal? Their diverging paths reveal a psychological complexity that might be the show's most profound commentary on determinism versus free will. At its core, the relationship between Ricks and Mortys contains a disturbing truth that casual viewers might miss. Every Morty across the multiverse exists primarily as a tool, specifically as a cloaking device for their Rick. This isn't just a convenient arrangement, it's a deliberate exploitation. The brainwaves of a Morty literally mask the genius brainwaves of a Rick, making them invisible to enemies. This creates not just a power imbalance, but a fundamental inequity built into the very fabric of their existence. Mortys aren't partners. They're biological shields designed to be expendable. This existential reality serves as the psychological foundation for evil Morty's character. His rebellion isn't simply about seeking power. It represents a profound rejection of this predetermined role. While our Morty gradually discovers this truth about his purpose, evil Morty appears to have fully internalized it. His actions suggest he reached a breaking point where the realization that his entire existence was designed for someone else's benefit became intolerable. This makes his motivations more nuanced than straightforward villainy. He's attempting to dismantle a system that inherently oppresses all Mortys. The show writers deliberately constructed evil Morty as an exploration of nature versus nurture. This philosophical approach raises uncomfortable questions. Could our Morty become evil Morty under different circumstances? Is evil Morty simply what happens when any Morty experiences one too many traumas at the hands of a Rick? This character design choice transforms evil Morty from a simple antagonist into a mirror, reflecting the potential dark future of our protagonist. The recurring theme of nature versus nurture throughout the series takes its most concrete form in the contrast between these two versions of essentially the same person. What makes this character particularly unsettling is how the production team carefully crafted every aspect of his presentation. Before leaving the show, Justin Roiland recorded multiple versions of evil Morty's limited dialogue to create the perfect vocal presence. The goal was specific: maintain enough familiar Morty vocal qualities to be recognizable while adding subtle differences that feel unsettling to the viewer. This calculated approach to the character's voice created a unique auditory identity that signals to viewers that something is fundamentally different about this particular Morty. The philosophical dimension of evil Morty extends beyond his personal motivations. He embodies one of the central themes of the entire series: free will versus determinism. In a multiverse where infinite versions of each character exist, making seemingly different choices, the show constantly questions whether true choice is possible or if characters are simply playing out predetermined roles based on their position in the multiverse. Evil Morty represents the ultimate rebellion against determinism, a character who refuses to accept that his role as a Morty defines his destiny. His attempt to break free from the Central Finite Curve can be interpreted as a literal escape from the deterministic constraints of his existence. This philosophical underpinning is precisely what makes evil Morty such a compelling antagonist. Behind-the-scenes discussions reveal the writer's intention to create a villain whose actions, while extreme, come from a justified position. Rather than creating a character who is evil for the sake of being evil, they developed someone whose motivations make sense within the moral framework of the show's universe. The oppression of Mortys is objectively real within the show, making evil Morty's rebellion against it understandable, even if his methods cross ethical lines. This moral ambiguity challenges viewers to question whether they should root against him at all. What's particularly fascinating is how the animation team contributed to the psychology of the character through subtle visual cues. Beyond simply looking like other Mortys, Evil Morty's physical presence was carefully designed to communicate his different psychological state. His movements lack the characteristic nervousness and uncertainty that define our Morty. Instead, his gestures are deliberate, controlled, and minimal, conveying a confidence and certainty that feels unnatural for a Morty. These visual distinctions serve as constant reminders that his psychological makeup differs fundamentally from what we expect. The contrast between Evil Morty and our Morty becomes even more interesting when we consider their similar experiences. Both have witnessed the callous nature of Rick's, both have been put in danger countless times, and both have been treated as disposable at various points. Yet they've taken radically different paths. This divergence suggests that either Evil Morty experienced something uniquely traumatic beyond what our Morty has faced, or there's a fundamental difference in how they processed similar experiences. This comparison raises profound questions about resilience, breaking points, and the formation of identity in response to trauma. The writers use this contrast to explore what makes people who they are. Is Evil Morty simply a Morty who lacked the specific bond that our Morty has formed with Rick C137? Our Rick, despite his flaws, has demonstrated moments of genuine care for his Morty that distinguish him from other Ricks. This suggests that perhaps the difference isn't in the Mortys at all, but in the Ricks they were paired with. Evil Morty might be the product of a Rick who was even more callous and exploitative than average, pushing him beyond a psychological breaking point. What's particularly striking is how Rick C137's character development creates a direct contrast with Evil Morty's ideology. While casual viewers might focus on Rick's unchanging cynicism, attentive fans notice his gradually increasing attachment to his Morty. From initially seeing him as completely replaceable to making genuine sacrifices for his well-being, Rick's evolution represents a growing acceptance of connection and interdependence. Evil Morty, conversely, has embraced complete rejection of this dependency, seeking autonomy at any cost. Their opposing trajectories highlight different responses to vulnerability, Rick reluctantly embracing it while Evil Morty violently rejects it. This psychological contrast helps explain why our Morty hasn't followed Evil Morty's path despite similar hardships. The key difference may be that our Morty has experienced just enough genuine care from Rick to maintain hope in their relationship, while Evil Morty either never received that care or experienced a betrayal so profound it eliminated any possibility of trust. The thin line between these experiences serves as a constant tension in the series, suggesting our Morty might always be just one devastating betrayal away from a similar transformation. That thin line between trust and betrayal didn't just shape individual Mortys. It transformed the entire power structure of the multiverse. In what looked like an ordinary election on the Citadel, a carefully orchestrated deception was unfolding that would permanently alter the balance between Ricks and Mortys. The episode The Ricklantis Mix-Up, also known as Tales from the Citadel, initially seemed disconnected from the main storyline, but it was hiding perhaps the most significant plot development of the series in plain sight. When this episode first aired, many viewers assumed they were getting a simple anthology story, a collection of vignettes showing life on the Citadel while our main Rick and Morty went off on an adventure to Atlantis that we never actually got to see. The genius of this approach was that it lowered our guard. We weren't looking for major plot developments in what appeared to be a world-building detour, which made the final revelation all the more impactful. The episode presents multiple storylines that, on first viewing, seem to be exploring different aspects of Citadel society. We follow a group of Morty cadets starting at the police academy, a factory worker Rick struggling with his position, a group of Morty students on a field trip, and a pair of cop partners, one Rick and one Morty, navigating corruption in the police force. These individual tales work as compelling stories on their own, but they're also pieces of a much larger puzzle that the writers were assembling right under our noses. Running through all of these stories is the presidential election campaign, where we meet candidate Morty. He appears to be just another idealistic Morty, but one with unusual charisma and political savvy. What makes this character especially brilliant is how the writers used our assumptions against us. By this point in the series, we had come to expect Mortys to be followers, not leaders. So when candidate Morty speaks eloquently about bridging divides and creating a more equal society, it seems like refreshing idealism rather than calculated manipulation. The political thriller aspects of the Ricklantis mix-up are remarkably sophisticated for an animated comedy. The episode doesn't just reference political drama tropes, it fully embraces them, presenting assassination plots, backroom deals, campaign strategy sessions, and corrupt power brokers. This story could have been the central plot of a prestige drama series, yet it unfolds as just one thread in a 22-minute animated episode that's simultaneously telling several other complete stories. What's particularly impressive is how the episode manages to mirror real-world societal issues through the lens of Rick and Morty variants. The Citadel portrays clear class divisions, with privileged Ricks at the top of society and most Mortys relegated to lower-class positions. The police force storyline tackles issues of corruption and abuse of power. The school field trip sequence examines how educational systems can perpetuate inequality. By filtering these complex social topics through the show's science fiction premise, the writers created commentary that feels organic rather than forced. The animation team deserves special recognition for their work on this episode. They created hundreds of unique Rick and Morty variants, each with subtle differences in appearance and personality. This visual diversity made the Citadel feel like a living, breathing society rather than just a backdrop. Some Ricks wear suits and have slicked back hair, while others appear disheveled and wear factory uniforms. Mortys range from innocent schoolchildren to hardened police officers. These visual distinctions help viewers keep track of multiple storylines while reinforcing the episode's themes about identity and social hierarchy. The campaign speeches delivered by candidate Morty are masterpieces of dramatic irony. When he says, "I'm not a politician, I'm just a kid who knows the difference between right and wrong," it seems straightforward on first viewing. But once you know his true identity, these lines take on completely different meanings. His promise to tear down the wall, separating Ricks and Mortys, foreshadows his ultimate goal of breaking through the Central Finite Curve, though viewers wouldn't understand this connection until much later in the series. What makes the Ricklantis mix-up particularly remarkable is how it draws inspiration from entirely different genres of television and film. The episode deliberately mimics the structure and visual language of shows like The Wire and films like The Godfather to establish a more serious tone. These references aren't just stylistic choices. They help signal to viewers that something important is happening, even if the full significance isn't immediately apparent. The creators were effectively teaching the audience how to watch this new kind of Rick and Morty episode, one where the jokes might be fewer, but the narrative payoff would be greater. All of these seemingly disconnected storylines converge in the episode's final moments. As the newly elected President Morty eliminates the Shadow Council that tried to control him, we see his eye patch reflection in a glass panel, and the familiar notes of "For the Damaged Coda" begin to play. This moment of revelation connects back to an episode from seasons earlier, rewarding attentive viewers while shocking casual fans who might have forgotten about this character's existence. While the Ricklantis mix-up was setting up one of the show's most important long-term arcs, it's worth noting that another episode from the same season was getting much more attention. Pickle Rick became an instant cultural phenomenon with merchandise, memes, and endless quotes. Yet in terms of the show's overall narrative, the Ricklantis mix-up was arguably much more significant. This contrast illustrates something important about Rick and Morty's approach to storytelling. They balance viral, standalone episodes with careful, long-form narrative development, allowing the show to satisfy both casual viewers and dedicated fans analyzing every detail. The episode's structure brilliantly juggled these multiple storylines in a way that initially seemed designed to showcase life on the Citadel, but ultimately served evil Morty's master plan. Each vignette not only built our understanding of Citadel society, but also showed aspects of the system that evil Morty would later exploit or dismantle. The corrupt cops, the educational propaganda, the exploited worker Ricks, all of these elements created a society ripe for the kind of revolution evil Morty was planning, though framed in a way that initially made him seem like a positive force for change rather than a calculating mastermind. This approach to storytelling represented a significant evolution for the series. While Rick and Morty had always included callbacks and continuing elements, the Ricklantis mix-up demonstrated a new level of commitment to long-form narrative. It showed that the creators were confident enough in their audience's attention span and intelligence to plant seeds that wouldn't fully bloom until seasons later. This wasn't just a funny episode with a twist ending. It was a crucial piece of a much larger story that was slowly unfolding across the series. The seeds planted in the Ricklantis mix-up grew into something far more calculated than anyone initially suspected. What makes a villain truly brilliant isn't just their ability to deceive their enemies, but to make those same enemies actively support their own destruction. A psychological manipulation that Evil Morty perfected during his time as president of the Citadel. Following his election victory, Evil Morty embarked on what appeared to be a progressive administration. His initial reforms seemed aimed at addressing the fundamental inequalities between Ricks and Mortys that had defined Citadel society since its inception. He dismantled the corrupt power structures, initiated programs that improved living conditions for the average Morty, and implemented technological advancements that modernized various aspects of Citadel infrastructure. To the casual observer, and indeed to many residents of the Citadel, these changes represented a new era of fairness and prosperity. What made these reforms so compelling was their apparent sincerity. Citizens of the Citadel, particularly the historically oppressed Mortys, found themselves with greater rights and opportunities than ever before. Public facilities improved, educational reforms were implemented, and even the economic disparities began to narrow. These tangible improvements made it difficult to question the president's motives, creating a shield of popular support that protected him from potential challengers. After all, who would oppose a leader delivering such positive results? But beneath this veneer of progress lay a meticulously crafted deception. Each policy, each reform, each governmental restructuring served a dual purpose that only Evil Morty fully understood. While publicly framed as steps toward equality, these changes simultaneously eliminated potential threats to his authority, consolidated his control over crucial systems, and provided access to restricted information and locations throughout the Citadel. The genius of his approach wasn't merely in hiding his true agenda, but in making the path to that agenda appear beneficial to the very people he was manipulating. The show's writers deliberately cultivated this moral ambiguity around Evil Morty's presidency. They refused to paint him as a cartoonishly evil dictator, instead presenting policies that viewers themselves might support if judged solely on their surface merits. This created a fascinating tension for the audience. Were we wrong to condemn him? Could his ends justify his means? Was he actually the hero of his own story? By avoiding simple villainous characterization, the writers forced viewers to constantly reassess their understanding of Evil Morty's true nature and intentions. This narrative approach generated tremendous engagement within the fanbase. Between episodes featuring Evil Morty, viewers developed increasingly complex theories about his ultimate goals. The deliberate ambiguity and limited screen time became storytelling strengths rather than limitations, allowing the mystery surrounding the character to deepen with each appearance. Fan communities thrived on analyzing every frame, dialogue choice, and background detail for clues about what this enigmatic figure might really be planning. These background details proved particularly rewarding for attentive viewers. Throughout scenes depicting Evil Morty's presidency, the animation team incorporated subtle visual elements that told a deeper story. Observant fans noticed that while some parts of the Citadel flourished with new development and technology, other areas showed concerning changes, increased security measures, mysterious construction projects, and unusual experiments. These visual contradictions reinforce the dual nature of Evil Morty's governance, public prosperity masking private machinations. What's particularly impressive about the Evil Morty storyline is how thoroughly the production team developed the world around him, despite showing only fragments of it on screen. They established a comprehensive political structure for the Citadel, complete with various departments, bureaucratic processes, and power dynamics. This extensive world-building informed every aspect of Evil Morty's presidential arc, ensuring that even his briefly glimpsed actions felt consistent with a fully realized governmental system. The writers knew far more about how the Citadel functioned than they ever explicitly shared with viewers. Perhaps most impressive was Evil Morty's unparalleled understanding of both Rick and Morty's psychology. While Rick C-137 certainly possesses brilliant scientific knowledge and cunning, Evil Morty demonstrated something potentially more valuable: the ability to comprehend and exploit the fundamental nature of both Rick's and Morty's across the multiverse. He understood that Rick's, for all their genius, share predictable weaknesses: arrogance, emotional detachment, and a tendency to underestimate others. Similarly, he recognized that most Mortys, despite their subservient position, harbor deep-seated resentments that could be channeled toward his purposes. This psychological insight allowed Evil Morty to implement a divide-and-conquer strategy that prevented unified opposition to his rule. He carefully balanced concessions to both groups, keeping the Ricks pacified with continued privileges while giving the Mortys just enough improvement to secure their loyalty. When necessary, he could pivot to play these groups against each other, ensuring neither could effectively organize against him. His profound understanding of their respective insecurities and desires proved crucial to maintaining control long enough to complete his actual objective. What made this storyline particularly satisfying for longtime fans was the eventual confirmation of one of the most persistent theories about Evil Morty's ultimate goal. For seasons, dedicated viewers had speculated that his presidential position was merely a means to gather critical information about something called the Central Finite Curve. When the Season 5 finale, Rick Jack, finally revealed Evil Morty's plan to escape this artificial boundary within the multiverse, it validated years of careful analysis and speculation by the community. This payoff demonstrated the show's remarkable commitment to long-form storytelling. Despite Evil Morty appearing in only a handful of episodes across multiple seasons, his arc maintained narrative coherence and growing significance to the overall mythology of the series. The writers managed to develop a compelling antagonist with minimal screen time, keeping his presence felt even in episodes where he didn't appear through references, thematic parallels, and the looming question of when he might return. The strategic spacing of Evil Morty's appearances created a palpable sense of anticipation, unlike any other element in the series. By limiting his direct involvement, the show elevated his significance and allowed the character to evolve in impact without overexposure. Each appearance felt consequential precisely because they were so rare, and viewers understood that any episode featuring Evil Morty would likely contain crucial developments for the series' larger mythology. Evil Morty's presidential arc also revealed something significant about the show itself. Rick and Morty had transcended its initial premise as a wacky sci-fi comedy to develop intricate, multi-season storylines worthy of detailed analysis. While maintaining the episodic format that allowed for creative freedom and accessibility to casual viewers, the show demonstrated a confidence in its audience's intelligence and attention span that is rare in animated comedy. While the show's episodic format provided creative freedom, it was the fifth season finale that delivered the most universe-altering revelation in Rick and Morty history. What if everything Rick has ever shown us was just a carefully curated slice of reality, specifically designed to maintain his position as the smartest being in existence? The Central Finite Curve wasn't just another sci-fi concept. It was the ultimate truth that had been hiding in plain sight since Season 1, fundamentally reshaping our understanding of Rick's adventures and the multiverse itself. Season 5's finale, Rick Jack, finally answered the question fans had been asking for years. What was Evil Morty really after? The answer proved more profound than anyone anticipated. The Central Finite Curve was revealed as an artificial construct, a walled-off section of the multiverse containing only realities where Rick remains the dominant intellect. This wasn't just another dimension-hopping adventure. It was a revelation that the entire show had taken place within a carefully cordoned-off portion of infinite possibility, specifically engineered to keep Rick at the top of the intellectual food chain. This revelation casts all of Rick's previous adventures in an entirely new light. His seemingly limitless exploration of the multiverse was actually confined to a deliberately restricted subset of reality. All those times Rick claimed to be the smartest being in the universe? Well, that was technically true, but only because he and other Ricks had quite literally removed all universes where that wasn't the case. The implications are staggering. Rick's godlike status was partially manufactured rather than entirely earned. The visual representation of this concept in the Season 5 finale stands as one of the show's most striking animation sequences. When Evil Morty finally breaks through the curve, the animation team created something visually distinct from anything we'd seen before. The portal that Evil Morty uses to escape isn't the familiar green that we've grown accustomed to throughout the series. Instead, it features a unique color scheme that signals something fundamentally different about where he's going. This newly colored portal indicates that Evil Morty is no longer operating within Rick's multiverse or on Rick's side of the curve. He's venturing somewhere genuinely new and unknown. This visual distinction was a deliberate choice to communicate the significance of what was happening. Throughout the series, portal travel had become so commonplace that viewers hardly registered it as remarkable anymore. By changing the visual language of portal travel for this moment, the show's creators emphasized that this wasn't just another hop between dimensions. It was a breakthrough into entirely uncharted territory. The brilliance of this revelation lies in how it recontextualizes Evil Morty's entire character arc. His presidential campaign and subsequent reforms at the Citadel weren't ends in themselves. They were calculated steps toward gathering the resources and information he needed to break through the curve. What initially appeared to be a bid for political power was actually a means to an entirely different end. Evil Morty didn't want to rule over Rick's and Morty's. He wanted to escape their influence entirely. This massive plot development suggests that Evil Morty's escape wasn't into nothingness, but into a potentially infinite multiverse, beyond Rick's influence. In true Rick and Morty fashion, the show manages to wall off these enormous implications, effectively containing them in another part of the multiverse so they don't have to immediately address all the ramifications. It's a clever narrative device that allows the show to introduce a universe-altering concept without immediately reworking the entire premise of the series. The concept of the Central Finite Curve raises profound questions about free will and determinism within the show's universe. If Rick's dominance across multiple realities wasn't entirely natural but was artificially maintained, what does that say about his character? Is his genius still impressive if he's been systematically eliminating competition? These questions add layers of complexity to Rick's character beyond his already established flaws and vulnerabilities. Even more intriguing is what exists beyond the curve. The implication is clear. There are beings out there who rival or surpass Rick's intelligence. This opens the door to bigger threats and challenges than anything we've seen before. If Rick is no longer guaranteed to be the smartest person in any given room, how will that affect his confidence, his schemes, his very identity? The stakes have been fundamentally altered. What makes the Central Finite Curve concept particularly impressive is how it takes established scientific theories about multiverses and adds a uniquely Rick and Morty twist. While multiverse theory in quantum physics suggests the existence of infinite parallel realities, the idea that these could be artificially segregated based on the intellectual dominance of a single individual is pure Rick and Morty. It's scientifically informed but narratively inventive in a way that pushes beyond what most science fiction attempts. The writing team's commitment to this revelation is evident in how they built toward it across multiple seasons. Though the concept wasn't explicitly named until much later, the groundwork was being laid from early on. This long-form storytelling approach demonstrates a remarkable level of planning that contrasts with the show's reputation for improvisation and experimental comedy. Even in a series that often embraces chaos and randomness, some elements were carefully constructed from the beginning. The complexity of Evil Morty's escape plan further cements his status as an intellectual equal, or perhaps even superior, to Rick C-137. The science involved in breaking through the curve isn't just complicated, it's revolutionary within the show's universe. It required understanding the fundamental structure of reality in ways that apparently even the Ricks hadn't fully explored, or had deliberately obscured. Evil Morty didn't just beat Rick at his own game. He changed the rules entirely. This revelation serves as a perfect example of how Rick and Morty balances its comedic sensibilities with sophisticated world-building. In a show that once featured Rick turning himself into a pickle to avoid family therapy, We now have a multi-layered exploration of metaphysical boundaries and existential confinement. The Central Finite Curve concept manages to be intellectually stimulating while still fitting within the show's established tone and universe. That eye patch wasn't just a cool accessory, it represented the beginning of a remarkable journey in visual storytelling that most viewers completely overlook. When we examine Evil Morty across his appearances, we find an animation masterclass in character development that speaks volumes without saying a word. The animators didn't just create another Morty variant. They crafted a visual language specifically for him that rewards careful analysis and reveals his true nature long before the plot confirms it. What makes Evil Morty's visual evolution so fascinating is how deliberately his character design has been modified across each appearance. His initial eye patch concealed the control device, but the animation team went much further than this simple distinction. They created a character whose entire physical presence communicates something fundamentally different about his psychology. From the very beginning, his movements told a story that his dialogue never needed to. The contrast between regular Morty and Evil Morty becomes apparent when you study their animations side by side. While our familiar Morty exhibits nervous energy, constantly fidgeting and making exaggerated facial expressions, Evil Morty's movements are calculated and purposeful. He doesn't waste motion. The animation team deliberately gave him a more controlled physical presence that visually separates him from the standard Morty template we're used to seeing. His posture remains consistently upright and deliberate, communicating authority through body language alone. This deliberate animation style serves as brilliant foreshadowing. Long before we understand his plans or motivations, the visual cues tell us this character operates differently from other Mortys. His confident stance and measured gestures hint at his exceptional nature, while the typical Morty flails with characteristic insecurity. These animation choices weren't random stylistic decisions, but carefully crafted visual storytelling elements that built his character without relying on exposition. When Evil Morty assumed the presidential role, his visual design evolved again in subtle but meaningful ways. His outfit balanced familiar Morty elements with symbols of authority, creating an intentional visual dissonance that reinforced his unique position in the Citadel. This wasn't simply a costume change, but a deliberate effort to create a character who visually represented the complex duality of his nature, simultaneously a Morty and something entirely different. The design team wanted viewers to feel that tension visually, making his familiar appearance seem somehow unsettling when paired with authority symbols. Lighting plays an equally important role in Evil Morty's visual storytelling. His scenes consistently employ shadow techniques that create visual motifs representing his hidden nature and agenda. The lighting department developed specific approaches just for his scenes, using shadows strategically to hint at the character's duplicity and concealed plans. These lighting choices create a visual signature that helps establish the tone of his appearances without requiring explicit explanation. What's particularly impressive about Evil Morty's animation is the attention paid to micro-expressions. Close analysis reveals subtle facial reactions that regular Morty simply doesn't display. While our Morty's emotions play clearly across his face, Evil Morty's expressions are more controlled, with tiny movements revealing glimpses of his true thoughts before disappearing behind a calculated mask. These micro-reactions suggest fundamentally different emotional processing, as though he's constantly performing rather than reacting naturally. The evolution of these visual elements tracks perfectly with his narrative journey from apparent victim to revealed manipulator to elected leader to dimensional revolutionary. With each transformation in the story, the visual design adjusts accordingly while maintaining the core elements that make the character instantly recognizable. This visual consistency across different contexts helps maintain character coherence despite his limited screen time. Color palettes also evolve throughout Evil Morty's appearances. The art team developed specific color schemes for his scenes that subtly enhance the sense of something being slightly off or menacing. These choices weren't random but carefully selected to create visual continuity across his appearances while distinguishing his scenes from the show's typical aesthetic. The color work complements the shadow techniques to create a consistent visual motif associated with his character. Animation supervisor Steve Levy spoke about this process in animation panels, noting that Evil Morty required special attention from the animation team. They developed reference sheets specific to his character that outlined the precise ways his movements should differ from standard Mortys. Animators were instructed to avoid certain gestures and expressions that would be typical for the character, replacing them with more measured alternatives that communicated his different nature. Perhaps most impressive is how all these visual elements came together in Evil Morty's final appearance breaking the Central Finite Curve. This sequence represented one of the most technically challenging animation tasks in the entire series. The team needed to develop entirely new animation techniques to represent multidimensional space and the shattering of established reality. The sequence required innovative approaches to convey the unprecedented nature of what was happening within the show's universe. The visual representation of the curve's destruction demanded cutting-edge animation that pushed beyond the show's established visual language. Unlike the familiar green portals that had been the show's interdimensional signature, Evil Morty's gold portal represented something fundamentally different: access to realms previously sealed off. The animation team created a distinctive visual effect that communicated this difference instantly, making viewers understand that something unprecedented was occurring without requiring lengthy explanation. This scene's complexity highlights the animation team's commitment to visual storytelling. They could have simplified the sequence, but instead created an elaborate visual spectacle that conveyed the monumental significance of Evil Morty's actions. The golden portal effect, the fragmenting of reality, and the visual representation of crossing a previously impenetrable boundary all required innovative animation solutions that hadn't been used in previous episodes. Evil Morty's final moments on screen feature some of the most nuanced animation in the series. His expression as he prepares to leave contains subtle layers of emotion, determination, satisfaction, perhaps even a hint of uncertainty about what lies beyond. These final moments showcase the culmination of the character's visual evolution, bringing together all the elements that had been carefully developed across his limited appearances. Those subtle layers of emotion we glimpsed in Evil Morty's final moments might be more than just satisfaction at escaping the Central Finite Curve. They could be the culmination of a deeply personal vendetta against the man who abandoned him. Among the countless theories swirling around this enigmatic character, one stands out as particularly compelling. What if Evil Morty is actually Rick C-137's original Morty? This theory has gained remarkable traction within the fandom, and for good reason. The show has deliberately shrouded Rick C-137's history in mystery, especially regarding his relationships with his original family. We've seen fragments of Rick's past, his grief over his wife's death, his rage against the Citadel, his 20-year absence from Beth's life. But the series has carefully avoided explaining what happened during those missing decades. This narrative void creates the perfect breeding ground for speculation about Rick's potential relationship with a Morty that predates the one we've followed throughout the series. What makes this theory so compelling is how it potentially explains Evil Morty's exceptional abilities. If he was indeed Rick C-137's original companion, he would have had unparalleled access to Rick's knowledge, techniques, and technology. Think about it. Our Morty has developed remarkable competence just from his relatively brief time with Rick. Imagine a Morty who spent years as the sole apprentice to the smartest Rick in the multiverse, absorbing his brilliance, understanding his vulnerabilities, and learning his methods. This would explain how Evil Morty consistently stays several steps ahead of Rick C-137, demonstrating a level of intellect and strategic thinking that no other Morty has shown. The creators' approach to this theory has been particularly fascinating. They've neither confirmed nor denied it in interviews, maintaining a calculated ambiguity that keeps fans engaged in speculation. This isn't accidental. It's a deliberate storytelling strategy. By acknowledging the theory's popularity without providing definitive answers, the writers maintain narrative flexibility while keeping the audience invested in the mystery. The show thrives on this kind of engagement, where fans become active participants in constructing potential narratives that might eventually be confirmed, subverted, or reimagined. Throughout the series, we've witnessed Rick's extreme emotional reactions when Morty faces serious danger, moments of vulnerability that seem at odds with his typically detached persona. These instances take on new significance when viewed through the lens of the original Morty theory. What if these aren't just demonstrations of Rick's grudging affection for his current Morty, but manifestations of deep-seated guilt over a previous Morty he failed to protect? Rick's protective instincts might be partially driven by a determination not to repeat past mistakes, suggesting his cynicism and emotional walls could be defense mechanisms against prior trauma. The visual evidence scattered throughout the series offers intriguing support for this theory. Attentive viewers have spotted memory sequences and photographs in Rick's garage that contain possible references to an earlier Morty who doesn't align with our Morty's established timeline. These visual clues are subtle but significant, potentially revealing fragments of a history that Rick has tried to bury. The creators excel at this form of visual storytelling, embedding meaningful details that reward close analysis and repeated viewing. One of the most compelling aspects of this theory is how it provides a coherent explanation for evil Morty's motivations. His animosity toward Rick wouldn't just be philosophical or abstract. It would be deeply personal, stemming from a specific betrayal or abandonment. This would transform evil Morty from a fascinating but somewhat distant antagonist into a tragic figure whose villainous trajectory began with genuine hurt. His determination to escape the Central Finite Curve could be seen not just as a rejection of Rick-dominated realities, but as the final stage of emotional separation from his former mentor. When we analyze Rick C-137's known timeline, we find a conspicuous gap that could potentially accommodate an original Morty. As noted in the research, the complex timeline of Rick C-137's life contains a 20-year period where his activities are largely unknown, potentially including raising an original Morty. This extensive period provides ample time for Rick to have formed a relationship with a different Morty, trained him extensively, and experienced some catastrophic falling out that set both characters on their current paths. Rick's extreme protectiveness over our Morty takes on new dimensions when considered through this theory. These moments of vulnerability could be a subconscious manifestation of guilt over a previous Morty he failed to protect. If Rick had already lost one Morty, either through death, abandonment, or by somehow creating the villain we now know as Evil Morty, his current relationship would inevitably be colored by that history. His gruff exterior and insistence that Morty means nothing to him could be a psychological defense against experiencing that pain again. The theory also offers a compelling explanation for why Evil Morty seems fundamentally different from other Mortys we've encountered. His exceptional intelligence and his deep understanding of Rick's weaknesses wouldn't just be random traits, but the result of direct tutelage under Rick C-137. He would have had the opportunity to learn directly from Rick, gaining insights into his strategies, vulnerabilities, and the intricacies of his personality. This intimate knowledge would account for his consistent ability to outmaneuver Rick and his mastery of advanced technology that seemingly exceeds even Rick's capabilities. What's particularly elegant about this theory is how it enhances the existing narrative without contradicting established facts. Whether or not it ultimately proves true, it demonstrates the show's remarkable ability to create a mythology flexible enough to accommodate multiple interpretations. The writers have constructed a universe where fan theories can coexist with canonical events, enriching rather than undermining the viewing experience. The deliberate gaps in Rick's backstory serve as creative spaces where fan theories can flourish. This approach has fostered an engaged community around the show, with viewers actively participating in expanding and interpreting the mythology. Few fan theories have generated as much discussion and analysis as the possibility that Evil Morty is Rick C-137's original Morty, speaking to both the compelling nature of the theory itself and the show's skill in creating narrative frameworks that support such speculation. Timeline analysis of Rick's known history reveals fascinating possibilities. We know Rick abandoned his family, traveled the multiverse, waged war against the Citadel, and eventually returned to a version of his family, but 20 years remain largely unaccounted for. This extended period provides more than enough time for Rick to have raised, trained, and somehow lost an original Morty. The mathematical possibilities align perfectly with the emotional subtext of Rick's character, a man haunted by more than just the loss of his wife. The original Morty theory doesn't just explain Evil Morty's origins, it potentially recontextualizes the entire series. every interaction between Rick and our Morty becomes laden with additional meaning. Every moment of genuine connection colored by the possibility of past failure. And every step in Evil Morty's plan informed by intimate knowledge of his former mentor. It transforms Evil Morty from a fascinating villain into a dark reflection of what our Morty could become, and reframes Rick as a man desperately trying to avoid repeating past mistakes. If Evil Morty truly represents Rick's past failure, then his influence extends far beyond theoretical origins into the daily reality of our main characters' lives. Have you ever noticed how Rick's behavior toward Morty subtly shifts after each Evil Morty encounter? Those aren't coincidences. They're the ripple effects of a threat that forces Rick to confront his greatest fear, that he might be creating the very monster he's trying to avoid. The relationship between Rick and Morty sits at the heart of the series, and Evil Morty's presence casts a long shadow over their dynamic, even without direct interaction. After Evil Morty's presidential reveal, subsequent episodes show Rick becoming increasingly protective of Morty in ways that feel almost desperate. This isn't just character development, it's Rick responding to the existential threat that Evil Morty represents. For Rick C-137, Evil Morty isn't just another villain. He's living proof that the Rick-Morty partnership can catastrophically fail. This protective instinct manifests in ways both obvious and subtle. When Rick witnesses Morty making independent decisions that mirror aspects of Evil Morty's self-determination, his reactions range from dismissive mockery to genuine concern. It's as if Rick is constantly evaluating how close his Morty might be to breaking away. The writers cleverly use this dynamic to create tension without ever explicitly mentioning Evil Morty in these moments. For Morty, the impact is equally profound but more internal. Our Morty has never directly interacted with Evil Morty, yet the yellow-shirted president represents both a warning and a temptation. Evil Morty achieved something our Morty occasionally dreams of: complete independence from Rick's influence and manipulation. When Morty fights for autonomy in his adventures, he's unknowingly walking a path that Evil Morty has already blazed, raising the unsettling question of how similar their journeys might become. This tension comes to a head in Season 6's finale, Fear No Mort, where Morty's deepest fears are explored. The episode reveals that Morty's greatest anxiety isn't about monsters or death, but about Rick's priorities. As the research indicates, Morty believes that Rick wouldn't jump into a fear hole for him, but that he would jump right into that hole for Diane. This insecurity can be traced directly back to the influence of Evil Morty's actions, as it highlights Morty's growing awareness of his potentially disposable role in Rick's life. The very realization that might have set Evil Morty on his rebellious path. The Smith family remains largely unaware of Evil Morty's existence, creating layers of dramatic irony throughout the series. When Beth, Jerry, or Summer comment on Rick and Morty's relationship or adventures, they're missing crucial context about the potential dangers of their bond. Only Rick fully comprehends the threat that Evil Morty represents, and this knowledge isolates him further from the family, driving him deeper into his protective and sometimes controlling behavior toward Morty. Episodes following Evil Morty's appearances contain dialogue that takes on new meaning when viewed through this lens. When Rick insists that Morty follow his instructions precisely, or when he dismisses Morty's ideas, these moments reflect not just Rick's general arrogance but his specific fear of losing control over his grandson. Similarly, when Morty pushes back against Rick's authority, these rebellions carry the weight of Evil Morty's precedent, though our Morty remains unaware of the parallel. The show's writers leverage this connection in character development, particularly for Rick. While the sources note that Morty and the Smith family develop because of their experiences with the infinite possibilities of the multiverse, Rick is different because he's already experienced these infinite possibilities. What changes Rick instead is forming actual human relationships and connection. This demonstrates how Evil Morty indirectly pushes Rick toward greater emotional vulnerability with our Morty. Rick knows that maintaining a genuine connection might be the only thing preventing history from repeating itself. This emotional growth becomes evident in moments where Rick loves and cares about Morty to the point where Morty outright ignoring Rick's advice actually genuinely hurt Rick. These instances of hurt feelings aren't just character moments, They're the direct result of evil Morty's influence, forcing Rick to confront his own vulnerabilities and the importance of his relationship with Morty. The evolution of Rick and Morty's partnership serves as a counterpoint to whatever relationship evil Morty might have had with his original Rick. While evil Morty chose complete rejection and independence, our Morty maintains a complex but ultimately meaningful connection with Rick. The contrast suggests that the central Rick-Morty relationship is both special and potentially fragile, always at risk of following evil Morty's path of division. Behind many of Rick's multidimensional travels lies a pattern of defensive surveillance. Though the exact number isn't specified, the research indicates that Rick monitors thousands of realities for signs of unusual Morty activity, a direct response to the threat evil Morty represents. This extensive monitoring system reveals just how seriously Rick takes the possibility of other Mortys following evil Morty's example, and suggests that much of Rick's seemingly random adventuring might actually be part of a calculated effort to track potential threats. The writing team uses evil Morty as a mirror to reflect the evolving bond between Rick and Morty, highlighting both its strengths and dangerous weaknesses. When Rick demonstrates genuine care for Morty, these moments stand in stark contrast to whatever triggered evil Morty's rebellion. When Rick manipulates or endangers Morty, we're reminded of the thin line separating their relationship from the one that produced a villain. Dream sequences and alternate reality versions of Morty occasionally appear in the series, offering glimpses of potential futures where our Morty edges closer to evil Morty's path. These moments serve as windows into Morty's subconscious, revealing his awareness of the power imbalance in his relationship with Rick and his occasional desire to overturn it. While these sequences never explicitly reference evil Morty, they explore the same themes of independence, resentment, and potential that define evil Morty's character. The impact of evil Morty extends to the structure of the show itself. While most episodes maintain a standalone adventure format, the lurking presence of evil Morty creates an undercurrent of continuity that rewards attentive viewers. Episodes that seem disconnected from the evil Morty storyline often contain subtle references to themes of independence and control that resonate with his character arc, creating a rich subtext throughout the series. Rick's awareness of evil Morty has fundamentally altered how he approaches his adventures with Morty. His protective instincts have intensified, but so has his determination to ensure that his Morty has a different experience than evil Morty did. This balancing act between protection and respect, between guidance and control, defines the evolving relationship at the center of the show, with evil Morty serving as the cautionary tale that neither character fully acknowledges. Behind that cautionary tale, Rick never acknowledges actually represents something unprecedented in adult animation, a villain whose development was mapped out years before his story would conclude. Unlike the improvisational nature that drives much of the series, evil Morty's limited screen time was calculated with almost scientific precision to maximize impact while maintaining mystery. This careful approach to character development reveals how the creative team behind Rick and Morty broke from traditional animation formulas to craft one of television's most patient long-term storylines. The Rick and Morty writing room operates with a fascinating duality. While much of the show thrives on improvisation and episodic adventures, evil Morty emerged from a completely different creative process. From the character's earliest conception, the writers envisioned a multi-season arc that would slowly unfold across years of storytelling. This methodical approach stands in stark contrast to how most animated series typically develop their characters, especially villains who tend to appear frequently to maintain audience engagement. Dan Harmon, the show's creator, faced a unique storytelling challenge with evil Morty. According to production notes, Harmon specifically wanted to reward dedicated fans who followed the character's arc while still making the show accessible to those who watched episodes sporadically. This delicate balance became crucial in maintaining the show's broad appeal, while simultaneously building a complex narrative for viewers who caught every episode. The writers understood that overwhelming the audience with too much serialized content risked alienating casual viewers, yet they still wanted to create something deeper for the show's most dedicated fans. What many viewers don't realize is that The writers maintained a completely separate document dedicated exclusively to tracking Evil Morty's arc and its connections to the main storyline. This remarkable level of organization ensured that all writers and episodes adhered to the established character development plans, maintaining consistency even as different writers tackled different episodes. This approach proved essential for creating a cohesive narrative for a character who appeared so infrequently. Without this meticulous planning, Evil Morty could have easily become inconsistent or lost narrative momentum between appearances. Production of Evil Morty. Episodes often required special consideration compared to standard episodes. The animation team faced the challenge of creating visually distinct episodes that maintained the necessary gravity for these pivotal story moments. The production schedule sometimes required adjustments specifically for Evil Morty episodes, with the team occasionally reshuffling the airing order to ensure optimal pacing and impact. This flexible approach allowed the creators to place Evil Morty episodes at strategic points in each season, creating natural build-up and resolution that enhanced the character's mysterious nature. The spacing of Evil Morty appearances throughout the series wasn't just a production necessity, it was a calculated storytelling strategy. By limiting his screen time and spreading his appearances across multiple seasons, the writers created a sense of anticipation that few animated series managed to achieve. This careful rationing of Evil Morty content also created fertile ground for fan theories to develop. Between episodes, the creators recognized that these theory-crafting communities actually enhanced engagement with the show, essentially turning the audience into active participants in the storytelling process during the long gaps between Evil Morty appearances. Justin Roiland's voice performance for Evil Morty represents another fascinating behind-the-scenes detail that most viewers never consciously notice. As the voice of both Rick and Morty, Roiland faced the challenge of creating a distinctive vocal identity for Evil Morty, without making him sound like a completely different character. His solution was brilliantly subtle. He maintained the fundamental qualities of Morty's voice, but stripped away the characteristic insecurity and nervousness. The result is a voice that's recognizably Morty, but with an unsettling confidence and calmness that perfectly communicates the character's unique psychology. While much of Rick and Morty thrives on improvisation with Roiland, often recording multiple takes of dialogue with different jokes and riffs, Evil Morty episodes were approached with unusual discipline. The writing for these episodes was meticulously crafted, with almost no improvised dialogue making it into the final cut. This exceptional level of script control ensured that the mystery developed exactly as planned, with no impromptu jokes or tangents that might undermine the carefully constructed narrative. The contrast between this tight scripting and the show's typically more freewheeling approach highlights how seriously the creative team took Evil Morty's storyline. The brilliant execution of Evil Morty's character arc across multiple seasons has fundamentally changed how the creators approach other long-term storylines in the series. Having proven that audiences will remain engaged with a character who appears extremely rarely, the writing team gained confidence in developing other multi-season narratives that require similar patience. This successful experiment in long-form storytelling within an otherwise episodic format has influenced the broader structure of later seasons, which increasingly balance self-contained adventures with ongoing plot threads that reward attentive viewers. The challenge of maintaining narrative coherence across a story that unfolds over years rather than episodes created unique difficulties for the writing team. With each new season, the writers had to re-examine previous Evil Morty episodes to ensure continuity while still finding fresh angles to explore. This process sometimes involved revisiting and refining the original plan for the character, adapting it to incorporate new ideas while staying true to the established framework. The fact that Evil Morty's arc maintained such remarkable consistency despite these challenges speaks to the extraordinary coordination between writers, producers, and animators throughout the production process. The impact of Evil Morty's carefully controlled appearances extends beyond just the character himself. This approach to long-term storytelling has influenced how the creators handle other recurring elements and characters in the show. By demonstrating that less can indeed be more when it comes to maintaining audience interest, the success of Evil Morty's storyline has encouraged the writers to be more patient and strategic with how they deploy other important narrative elements. trusting that viewers will remain engaged even through extended absences. When Evil Morty broke through the Central Finite Curve, he didn't just escape Rick's influence. He potentially transcended the very narrative framework that defined him. The yellow portal that carried him beyond Rick's carefully controlled sandbox represents the most significant moment of character evolution in the series, and opens up narrative possibilities that could fundamentally alter the show's multiverse. What makes this moment so groundbreaking isn't just that Evil Morty achieved his goal, but that he ventured into territory completely uncharted within the show's established cosmology. The implications of Evil Morty's escape are massive and far-reaching. This wasn't merely a character exiting a storyline, it was a deliberate shattering of the show's fundamental premise. Since the beginning, we've understood Rick to be the smartest being in existence, capable of outwitting any opponent. But Evil Morty's exit through that distinctive yellow portal suggests he's now operating in realms where Rick's intellect may be average or even inferior compared to other beings. This completely inverts the power dynamics we've become accustomed to throughout the series. What's particularly fascinating about this development is how it positions Evil Morty for a potential return. The show has established a clear pattern of revisiting significant characters and storylines when narratively meaningful. Evil Morty's journey beyond the curve almost certainly isn't finished. It's evolved into something new. His experiences in realities free from Rick's dominance would inevitably transform him, perhaps into something beyond the character we've known. This creates a tantalizing setup for his eventual reappearance in a form we might not immediately recognize. The animation details in Evil Morty's departure scene may contain subtle visual clues about his future. The creators often embed foreshadowing in background elements and specific animation choices. The gold portal wasn't just visually distinct from Rick's green portals. It represented access to something fundamentally different. If we examine the sequence frame by frame, there are fleeting images and color patterns that might hint at the nature of what lies beyond. These visual breadcrumbs could be setting up revelations about the true scope of the multiverse that won't be fully understood until later seasons. Showrunner Scott Marder has provided intriguing hints about the show's long-term planning, noting in interviews that major story arcs are mapped through Season 10. As Marder stated, "I can't tease a lot. I can tell you we're in the middle of writing Season 9. I can tell you that we've already got a couple ideas for Season 10 that are already kind of pinned. There's a full plan for a full 10-season saga." This suggests Evil Morty's story isn't concluded. It's simply entered a new phase within that overarching plan. His journey beyond the curve likely connects to future storylines in ways viewers can't yet anticipate. What makes Evil Morty's potential return so compelling is how it might reshape the show's cosmology. We've only ever seen realities where Rick is the apex intellect. What happens when we encounter beings who make Rick look intellectually average? This opens up possibilities for entirely new types of challenges and adversaries. Evil Morty might discover civilizations with technology far beyond Rick's capabilities, or encounter entities that operate on principles Rick can't comprehend. These discoveries could force a complete reevaluation of what we thought we knew about the show's universe. Fan theories about Evil Morty's future take numerous creative directions. Some speculate he'll find paradise, a reality free from the toxic influence of Rick's, where Mortys can develop their potential naturally. Others suggest a darker path, where he discovers threats even more dangerous than Rick beyond the curve, possibly forcing him to return and form an uneasy alliance with his former nemesis. The most intriguing theories consider the possibility that Evil Morty might evolve beyond human limitations altogether, becoming something akin to a multiversal entity with powers and perspective far beyond his origins. What makes these theories particularly resonant is how they connect to the show's core themes about free will, determinism, and the nature of identity. Evil Morty's escape represents the ultimate exercise of agency, refusing to accept the limitations imposed by others. His journey could serve as the ultimate exploration of what it means to truly define oneself outside predetermined roles. This thematic resonance suggests his story will continue to serve a pivotal role in the series' philosophical underpinnings. The way Evil Morty's journey might continue bears striking similarities to how other animated series have handled transformative character arcs. Shows like Avatar, The Last Airbender and Full Metal Alchemist demonstrated how characters who seek transcendence often return fundamentally changed, with new perspectives and abilities that challenge protagonists in unexpected ways. This established narrative pattern in animation suggests Evil Morty's potential return would serve a purpose beyond mere continuity. It would push the boundaries of what the show can explore philosophically and narratively. From a storytelling perspective, Evil Morty's absence creates a compelling narrative gap. The writers have masterfully established a character whose mere existence challenges the foundations of the series, then removed him from the board. This creates a looming tension. Viewers know he's out there somewhere, potentially growing more powerful or discovering universe-altering truths. This kind of narrative absence often precedes a dramatic return that recontextualizes everything that happened in between. When Evil Morty does reappear, it will almost certainly force a re-evaluation of events that occurred during his absence. One particularly compelling possibility is that Evil Morty might return not as a straightforward antagonist, but as something more complex. His journey beyond the curve could lead to a perspective shift that places him in an anti-hero role, or even positions him as the only being capable of addressing existential threats to the multiverse. This evolution would mirror the show's increasing willingness to explore moral complexity and challenge audience expectations about heroes and villains. The potential for Evil Morty to discover the true nature of reality beyond Rick's influence connects directly to the show's recurring interest in simulation theory and layered realities. Just as the Citadel represented a microcosm of control within the larger multiverse, the Central Finite Curve itself might be a construct within an even more complex cosmic structure. Evil Morty's explorations could reveal that even the seemingly infinite multiverse we've seen is just another controlled environment within something vaster, creating opportunities for mind-bending storylines that push animation's capacity for philosophical storytelling. What's especially significant about Evil Morty's future is how it might influence Rick's character development. The existence of a Morty who not only rejected Rick's authority but escaped his reach entirely represents a profound challenge to Rick's worldview. If Evil Morty returns having discovered truths or powers beyond Rick's understanding, it could force Rick to confront his limitations in ways no other character could provoke. This dynamic would create opportunities for significant growth in the series' protagonist while maintaining the show's commitment to challenging expectations. As we reflect on Evil Morty's complete arc throughout the series, we're seeing something truly extraordinary. A character who embodies a perfect hybrid of Rick's intellect without his emotional baggage, and Morty's experiences without his subservience. This combination allows Evil Morty to achieve what neither Rick nor Morty could on their own: true freedom from the established order of the Central Finite Curve. Evil Morty's journey challenges our perception of heroism and villainy in the show. His rebellion against Rick's dominance explores themes of control, autonomy, and self-determination in a universe where free will seems increasingly questionable. In many ways, Evil Morty is simply fighting for the right to exist beyond the limitations others have imposed on him. Aren't just cute fourth wall breaks. They're moments of genuine connection between the fictional and real worlds.